Chapter 29:13. Jianqin also stared fixedly at the clump of essence blood that was being refined in the sky. He felt rather uncertain inside. He understood the process of the ritual. The Dark Star race would first fuse the blood of all races into the White Tiger's essence blood, increasing the level of the power of the bloodline. The final goal was to increase the power of Siyu's bloodline to a level that was extremely close to the bloodline of a Grand Exalt. Of course, this so-called extremely close to the bloodline of a Grand Exalt was only equivalent to a first-generation descendant of a Grand Exalt. It was not actually reaching the same level of bloodline as a Grand Exalt. What the Dark Star race wanted to do was increase the level of Siyu's bloodline to the level of a first-generation descendant of a Grand Exalt. Even though he was not a true descendant and did not possess a Grand Exalt's bloodline, he would still be able to sense the remnant power of the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race. The connection would be so great that no Dark Star clansman would be able to achieve it. Even the Dark Star Emperor would not be able to do it. As a result, not only would Siyu's chances of triggering the remnant power of a Grand Exalt increase drastically, but the remnant power he could trigger would become even more powerful as well. Is the level of bloodline really that easy to increase? Jianqin asked himself. He was also a primordial realm expert. He had spent many years in the Saints' world, so he was rather knowledgeable. He had never seen or heard of a method, like how the Dark Star race used various types of essence blood to increase the level of Siyu's bloodline in the Saints' world. As a result, he became slightly worried as he watched the clump of essence blood slowly increase under the secret technique of the Dark Star race. He was worried that this would lead to some hidden problems for Siyu. Otherwise, if the level of bloodline could be increased so easily, there would be plenty of high-level bloodlines in the Saints' world where experts were as common as clouds. Although Tian Shengxian has told us the exact process of the ritual, I still feel like I'm missing some crucial information. I'll wait a little longer, thought Jianqin. He forcefully suppressed his urge to take action right now and paid close attention to the process of the ritual. After all, the Dark Star race was a race that had once given birth to a Grand Exalt. Perhaps they really did possess some wondrous methods that even the peak races of the Saints' world did not possess. 2 hours later, the 3-meter-wide blood essence sky had shrunk to the size of a fist under the refinement of the formation. As for the amount of blood essence sky, it had gone from hundreds of thousands of drops to over 1 million, to just over 100 drops. This amount was almost the same as the total amount of blood essence they had extracted from Siyu. The only difference was that the level of this blood essence was clearly higher than Siyu's own blood essence. However, in Jianqin's opinion, even though the essence blood had improved by quite a bit, it was still nowhere near the level of the Grand Exalt's bloodline. Under Tian Xingxian's control, a fist-sized drop of essence blood flowed from Siyu's heart into its body. Immediately, Sacred Feather's skinny body seemed to have received a huge amount of nutrients. It began to swell little by little, and his withered flesh and blood began to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. Siyu slowly opened its eyes. Its gaze was dim and lifeless, filled with a sense of weakness. Naturally, it could sense the recovery of its body, but the recovery did not seem to bring it any better. Instead, pain appeared in its eyes. It felt as if he was suffering from some kind of torment that even a divine beast like him, who had reached the divine king realm, found unbearable. Kacha! Suddenly, a crisp sound rang out. Sacred Feather's gradually recovering flesh suddenly exploded. It was as if his body had turned into a ceramic. At that moment, cracks appeared on the ceramic. More and more cracking sounds could be heard as more and more parts of its body exploded. The cracks continued to spread and soon covered its entire body. It really gave people the illusion that its entire body was going to shatter. This was the result of the essence blood not matching the body. This was because Siyu's essence blood had already been transformed and possessed the presence of the Dark Star race. As a result, from a certain perspective, the essence blood no longer belonged to the body. forcefully fusing with it would naturally lead to problems. At the same time, the strength of the essence blood had already exceeded the limits of what the body could contain. The appearance of these two problems led to the current situation. However, Tian Shengxian did not become flustered at all, as if he had already expected this. He formed a seal with his fingers and pointed at the air. In the next moment, a huge formation slowly appeared on the ground of the 36 main cities of the Dark Star race. It seemed to be connected to the entire city, and with the support of the tremendous energy that had been gathered for many years beneath the city, the formation suddenly began to operate. Arg! What's happening? My essence blood, the power of my soul, and my vital essences are all being rapidly drained away. Oh no, my cultivation is draining away. It's the formation below us. God damn it, the Dark Star race really did not have good intentions for trapping us here. They're using this formation to take our lives. As soon as the formation began to operate, a series of wails came from the 36 cities, mixed with monstrous anger and resentment. This was because all the cultivators who were confined in the cities had their cultivation power, soul power, essence blood, and even the boundless vitality in their bodies mercilessly stripped away. They gathered from all over the cities and were then transported to the distant imperial city by the formation. Not only the 36 cities, but the 100 Saints city was also affected. Although there was no formation on the ground of the 100 Saints city, there was a formation that was exactly the same as the 36 cities in the sky outside the barrier. It absorbed the energy of heaven and earth and operated on its own. It was also mercilessly devouring all the cultivators in the 100 Saints city, absorbing their cultivation power, soul power, essence blood, and boundless vitality. The bastards of the Dark Star race have secretly set up such a vicious formation. They want to sacrifice us. Let's go, let's get out of here. Let's go to the teleportation formation and leave the 100 Saints city immediately. In the 100 Saints city, the expressions of all the prodigies changed drastically. They all ran in the direction of the teleportation formation with fear and panic. However, at this moment there was a huge rumble. The teleportation formation that they had set up in the 100 holy cities as their only means of escape suddenly exploded. The entire teleportation formation was blown to pieces. Arg! No! Immediately, a prodigy let out a shrill cry. His face instantly paled and was filled with despair. Because they were in the devouring formation, all the power in their bodies was rapidly draining away, making them feel weaker and weaker. If this continued, they would not be able to hold on for long at all. They would die from the loss of vitality in their bodies. Within the 36 main cities, countless martial artists from the outside world screamed out in despair. They wanted to resist, but they discovered that as the great array beneath their feet revolved, their strength and vitality were constantly drained from their bodies, causing them to become increasingly weak, let alone resisting. They couldn't even maintain the strength to float in the air. This was because the devouring power was just too powerful, far more powerful than the life-devouring beast. Not only did it devour the vitality within them, but it also devoured the power of cultivation, the power of the soul, and so on. Dark Star race, you're so vicious. You actually want to sacrifice so many of us. Dark Star race, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. You will receive retribution for doing such a vicious thing. Our sects in the Saints' world will never let you go. In the royal capital of the Dark Star race, a total of 37 streams of energy that contain the power of cultivation, the power of the soul, life, and so on enveloped Sacred Feather in the form of colorful ribbons of light. As the streams of energy from the cultivators in the outside world were channeled into Sacred Feather's body, Sacred Feather immediately underwent a metamorphosis from inside out. He was undergoing a comprehensive improvement. This was because when the devouring formations in these cities devoured all kinds of energy, they also refined the energy at the same time. It was also because the cultivators in the outside world were not powerful that the refinement was completed in an extremely short amount of time. It became an extremely pure, ownerless energy that had been stripped of all its impurities. The clearly separated, ownerless energy was naturally very easy to absorb. As a result, when the streaks of light enveloped Siyu's soul, cultivation, vital energy, and vitality all recovered at an extremely terrifying rate. Due to the weakness of his body, he was unable to withstand the essence blood. But now he was quickly healed. This was because the boundless life force of thousands of cultivators was rapidly healing his injuries, catching up to the rate at which the essence blood was destroyed. At the same time, the energy formed from the vital energy of the cultivators rapidly strengthened Siyu's body as well. The energy formed from the power of the souls of thousands of cultivators also strengthened Sacred Feather's soul rapidly. In short, Siyu seemed to have ingested a supreme tonic right now. His entire body was being strengthened from the inside out. This was an improvement in every aspect. It could also be described as an evolution. This was because he was also fusing with the essence blood refined by the Darkstar race through a secret technique. Even though the speed of the fusion was not very fast, and the essence blood that possessed the presence of the Darkstar race was not very compatible with Siyu's body, showing signs of rejection, it still allowed the power of Siyu's bloodline to increase evidently. Jianqin sat on the top of the fifth divine hall as he paid close attention to Siyu's condition. He had been accumulating power secretly long ago, ready to take action at any time. This was because what was happening to Siyu had already exceeded his understanding. There were just far too many unknowns and uncertainties involved, as well as many heaven-defying methods that he had never heard of in the Saints' world. Chapter 29:14. Not only did the refinement target Siyu's body, but it also targeted Siyu's soul and even his bloodline. This process would obviously bring unimaginable pain to Sacred Feather. His body violently struggled in the void furnace as he let out a soundless roar of rage. The flesh that he had just recovered vanished bit by bit in the smelting process. At the same time, the presence of the ways of the Darkstar clan fused into his flesh through the smelting process of the furnace. Every time a sliver of the presence of ways that belonged to the Darkstar race fused into his body, the power of the Darkstar race that Siyu gave off would increase and become stronger. At the same time, the tremendous life force from the cultivators in the outside world constantly surged into Siyu's body. In the end, when the physical body was smelted by the void furnace, new flesh and blood would rapidly grow as it disappeared. The new flesh and blood had clearly become even more powerful after fusing with even more essence blood and all the power from the cultivators in the outside world. The only flaw was that although it still belonged to Siyu, it seemed to be leaning towards the Darkstar race no matter how one looked at it. The void smelting lasted for 4 hours before it ended. Even though it was a short period of time, Sacred Feather had undergone a qualitative leap in that short period of time. His strength had increased tremendously, ignoring everything else. Just his body had completely reached the level of a primordial realm expert after undergoing such an inhumane tempering. With such a strong physical body, it was barely able to withstand the enhanced blood essence. However, the devouring formations in the 36 main cities and the 100 saint cities did not stop operating. Not only did the devouring power not weaken, but it instead became even more powerful. Strands of energy and essence were absorbed from the cultivators in the outside world, all gathering above the royal city. In the end, the various energies gathered above the royal city became greater and greater. The spatial furnace stopped refining. The entire ceremony seemed to fall into a temporary silence at that moment. Only Tian Shangxian stood on the altar leisurely. He was in no hurry to take the next step as if he was waiting for something. Jianqin's heart was in his throat. Naturally, he could sense the increase in strength of Siyu's bloodline, but in his opinion, it was still nowhere close to the bloodline of the Grand Exalt's first generation. Even though he had never seen the Grand Exalt's descendant before, it was not difficult for him to imagine. This was because he could already tell that the increase in strength of Siyu's bloodline was more of a quantitative increase. Although it had increased in terms of quality as well, it was not as great as he had imagined it to be. Time passed bit by bit. The ceremony entered a strange state of stagnation. Tian Shengxian did not do anything at all. All the participants in the royal city waited quietly. Only the various energies above the royal city that relied on the devouring of the power of bloodlines, cultivation, souls, and life of the cultivators gathered more and more. Even though the cultivators from the outer world who were active in the Dark Star race were not powerful, they had the advantage in numbers. As a result, when all the cultivators from the outer world gathered together, the total amount of energy formed was extremely shocking. From afar, the vast amount of energy that had gathered above the royal capital had already formed an ocean, giving off a tremendous pressure. The pressure was so great that it made many primordial realm experts become stern. As for the godhood cultivators below the royal city, they were filled with fear. All of them trembled in fear. Finally, when over 70% of the cultivators' energies had been devoured, the devouring formation seemed to reach a state of saturation. All 37 formations stopped operating at the same time. Only now did Tian Shengxian make his next move. He turned around and faced the Grand Exalt statue. He bowed deeply and said loudly, "Please bestow your blood, ancestor." Tian Shengxian's voice was extremely loud. It boomed loudly, shaking up the entire Dark Star world. It even caused the laws of the Dark Star world to pulse. In the next moment, the space at the statue's chest blurred, and a droplet of blood the size of a raindrop appeared out of nowhere. That drop of blood seemed to contain an unimaginable might. More than that, it also contained an unfathomable aura of laws. Following the appearance of that drop of blood, the entire Dark Star realm began to surge. The laws of the great Tao appeared and interweaved with one another to form divine chains of order after another. All the Dark Star clansmen could sense a monstrous pressure from the blood. It was so great that they could not even think about resisting. The pressure suppressed their bloodline, their cultivation, their souls, and all their dignity. As a result, they could not help but kneel in the direction of the droplet of blood. T. Grand Exalt's essence blood. This is a droplet of essence blood that the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race left behind in the past. Jianqin stared at the droplet of blood that gave off a tremendous pressure from the top of the fifth hull. His mind shook violently as his heart churned. He had never thought that the Dark Star race would actually possess the essence blood of Grand Exalts. Moreover, the droplet of essence blood was clearly better preserved than the droplet of essence blood from the ancient Skywolf. So both the presence of ways and the strength of the bloodline surpassed the droplet of essence blood from the ancient Skywolf. Of course, this did not mean that the Dark Star Grand Exalt was more powerful than the ancient Skywolf. This was because when the two of them left behind their essence blood, they were in different situations. The Dark Star Grand Exalt had been slain by the Wood Spirit Grand Exalt when he was at his peak. At the same time, he had left behind various preparations before his death, so his essence blood was better preserved. The ancient Skywolf had left behind his essence blood when he passed away. Judging from the simple dwelling he had left behind, the ancient Skywolf clearly did not have as many meticulous arrangements as the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race, nor did he have so many clansmen worshipping him. As a result, his essence blood had naturally weakened over time. I've always felt like Tian Shengxian was hiding the most crucial part of the ritual from the 10 divine halls. Looking at it now, it's the Grand Exalt's essence blood that he's hiding. Though, don't tell me the Dark Star race wants to use the essence blood on Siyu? Jianqin was extremely unsettled. He knew just how precious and rare the essence blood of Grand Exalts was. If the Dark Star race really did use the essence blood on Siyu, they would really be going all out. But speaking of which, if Siyu really does fuse with the Grand Exalt's essence blood, his bloodline really can be raised to the level of a first-generation descendant of a Grand Exalt. So that's how it is. Everything the Dark Star race did before was to pave the way for Siyu to fuse with the Essence Blood. After all, it's the Essence Blood of a Grand Exalt. If you want to forcefully absorb it, you'll probably need to be a Grand Prime at the very least. Compared to Siyu's strength as a Divine King before, absorbing the Essence Blood of a Grand Exalt is basically impossible. If that's the case, I need to find a compromise, which is to change Siyu's bloodline so that Siyu becomes a member of the Dark Star race and absorb the Essence Blood as a member of the Dark Star race. That way, the rejection from the Grand Exalt's Essence Blood will be reduced to a minimum. At the same time, it can strengthen Sacred Feather's bloodline and body even further, so that his endurance will increase drastically when he fuses with the Essence Blood of a Grand Exalt. Chen's eyes lit up. To Sacred Feather, refining a droplet of Grand Exalt's Essence Blood with a formation personally presided over by Tian Shengxian was basically a great fortune. Chapter 29:15. Just as Genshin had expected, the droplet of Essence Blood that belonged to Kuei Bao slowly drifted toward Siyu under the guidance of Tian Shengxian's power, even in the Saint's world that was filled with experts. The Essence Blood successfully fused with Siyu's body. However, the fusion of the Essence Blood was a great test of life and death for Siyu. It was painful torture. His flesh and blood, which had just been strengthened by the fusion of the blood of all races, suddenly exploded again. The Essence Blood of a Grand Exalt was just too powerful. Even though Siyu's physical strength had increased by leaps and bounds, even though he had been converted into the bloodline of the Dark Star clansmen and could greatly reduce the rejection from the Essence Blood, only death awaited him if he wanted to absorb the Essence Blood with such weak strength. The power of the Essence Blood would forcefully make him explode, resulting in the death of his soul. This time, Siyu's injuries were clearly several times more severe than when he fused with the blood of the myriad races, or even several dozen times more severe. Not only was his body constantly exploding, but every time it exploded, a huge piece of flesh would vanish, reduced to the tiniest particles. Even his soul was damaged because this was the Essence Blood of a Grand Exalt. Not only did it contain great power of the bloodline, but it was also filled with essence, presence, and soul. Even though it was very weak, it was left behind by a Grand Exalt after all. It had reached an extremely terrifying level. Grand Exalts were also known as the Ways of the Heavens. They were like the embodiment of the Ways, able to create their own laws. As a result, everything they left behind had reached a supreme level. As a result, Siyu's soul was attacked by the tiny amount of soul power in the Essence Blood. His soul was on the brink of collapse. Sacred Feather's body trembled violently. At this moment, both his body and soul had suffered unimaginable damage. If nothing unexpected happened, the only thing that awaited him was the destruction of his soul. Clearly, all of this was within Tian Shengxian's expectations. At this moment, the various energies that the Dark Star clansmen had absorbed from the thousands of cultivators in the outside world finally came in handy. Previously, in the sky above the Imperial City, the power of bloodline, life, origin spirit, and cultivation had already gathered into an enormous sea of energy. Now, the ocean of energy that shone with various lights was like a flood. It surged into Siyu's body in an extremely crazy or even violent manner. The tremendous life force healed Siyu's wounds, while the power of the bloodline strengthened Siyu's bloodline. At the same time, the power of the Grand Exalt's Essence Blood was absorbed by Siyu's bloodline strand by strand. The power of the soul constantly repaired his soul that was on the brink of collapse. While consolidating his cultivation base, a portion of his cultivation power had also fused into his physical body. While tempering his physical body, it was also like a form of nourishment, forming a nourishing effect. The Essence Blood of a Grand Exalt was not so easy to absorb. The reason why Siyu could proceed so smoothly was not only because of the various energies he had absorbed from the cultivators in the outside world, but also because of the huge furnace that had appeared in outer space. The reason for that was because the furnace seemed to have gathered the power of the entire dark star realm. Furthermore, it also contained the power of the great Tao of the dark star realm and the power of the natural laws. It was refining sacred feather and increasing its absorption of all kinds of energy. Siyu's body was constantly destroyed by the power of the essence blood before being immediately repaired by the tremendous life force gathered from thousands of cultivators. As he went through this endless cycle of destruction and repair, his body, bloodline, and soul improved at an extremely obvious rate. This was because the energy within the Grand Exalt's essence blood would be absorbed strand by strand during the process of destruction and repair. As the energy of the essence blood of Grand Exalts was slowly absorbed, it naturally became weaker and weaker. The damage that Sacred Feather received became smaller and smaller as well, because he was undergoing a qualitative increase in every aspect, both internally and externally. He was leaping up. The difference between him and the essence blood of a Grand Exalt rapidly narrowed. On the altar, Tian Sheng's presence seemed to have fused with the world of the Darkstar clan. He stood below the statue of the Grand Exalt with his hands by his side as he stared at Siyu with his mist-shrouded eyes. A profound smile gradually appeared on his face as he said with a voice that only he could hear, "It's about time. It's time for the 100 Saints city to truly display its usefulness." Just as the heavenly sacred hall finished speaking, in the distant 100 Saints city, an invisible seal that no one in the 100 Saints city had noticed for so many years silently disappeared. With the disappearance of the seal, the entire 100 holy city underwent a subtle change in an instant. The entire city seemed to have changed from a dead city to a special city that seemed to have its own life. All the people from the 52 peak organizations that guarded the 100 Saints city paled as they sat on the ground weakly. Deep fear filled their faces. Mixed in with it was a monstrous rage. The teleportation formation had been destroyed, and around 70% of their power had been drained away. All the prodigies who remained in the 100 Saints city were filled with despair. This was because all the main cities of the Darkstar clan had been sealed up. Without the teleportation formation in the 100 Saints city, they could no longer leave the Darkstar clan. As for leaving the city, let alone whether the 10 armies of the Darkstar clan would allow them to leave, what could they do even if they fled? Were they supposed to cross the two-world mountain range again? They really didn't have the guts and courage to do so. At this moment, some of the prodigies who were sitting on the ground and panting heavily seemed to have sensed something. They subconsciously looked up at the sky with a trace of suspicion in their eyes. But in the next moment, this suspicion immediately turned into surprise. Did you feel it? It's the artifact spirit of the 100 Saints city. The artifact spirit of the 100 Saints city has finally been born. That's great, that's great. We've waited for so many years and tried countless methods. It's finally been born. Legend has it that the 100 Saints city not only has a defensive formation, but also an offensive formation. However, in order to prevent the Darkstar clan from noticing this offensive formation wasn't engraved in the city. Instead, it was left on the artifact spirit of the 100 Saints city. If the artifact spirit isn't around, this offensive formation naturally won't exist. But once the artifact spirit is born, this offensive means will also exist. At that moment, all the prodigies thought about the records of the 100 Saints city from their clans. Their eyes all lit up. At the same time, the message from the artifact spirit of the 100 Saints city echoed through the eyes of all the prodigies. Gather all of our power and use up the energy source that has been stored underground for many years. Through the amplification of the formation, we'll be able to unleash attacks that rival chaotic primes. All the prodigies became hopeful when they heard the artifact spirit's message. Of course, there were some people who were worried and hesitant. We can't do that. Once the energy source beneath the 100 Saint City is used up, we won't be able to use any of the defensive formations, and we won't have enough divine crystals. It's already a matter of life and death. We can't worry about that anymore. Quick, let's gather our greatest power and attack the two-world mountain range. We need to create a safe passage out of the entrance. An attack from a chaotic prime should be able to pierce through the two-world mountain range and escort us out. No life-devouring beast can stop it. All the prodigies made up their minds. Afterwards, all of their power began to pour into the 100 Saint City. They had never thought about attacking the Darkstar clan because the Darkstar clan possessed the Darkstar Emperor. The Darkstar Emperor was an expert on par with chaotic primes, and both his techniques and treasures were endless. An attack from a chaotic prime might not necessarily be able to kill the Darkstar Emperor. The first thing they thought about was fleeing from the Darkstar world. This was because something so major would definitely cause a huge uproar in the Saints' world. If all the peak organizations work together, they might actually be able to invite a grand exalt. Chapter 29:16. Not only were all the prodigies channeling all their power into the city, but even all the divine king Deathsworn and the cultivators they had recruited from the Saints' world channeled all their energy into the city as quickly as they could. At this moment of life and death, none of them held back in the slightest. While swallowing all kinds of divine pills like eating jelly beans to recover, they did their best to give it their all. This was because the formation cast down by the Darkstar race in the sky above the 100 Saint City had already filled them with fear. In particular, they had been reduced to a miserable state where 70% of their powers and life had been sucked away by the formation in such a short amount of time. They had lost all trust in the Darkstar race. They no longer believed in the Fifth Hall Master's promise to protect them. At the same time, they no longer believed in the Darkstar Emperor's promise to let them leave alive. As a result, the artifact spirit of the 100 Saint City that had suddenly appeared became their only hope of escape. As everyone channeled all their energy without holding back, the entire city gradually shone with a unique light that had never been seen before. The reason why it was unique was because the former 100 Holy City, no matter what kind of formation it deployed, gave people a very old-fashioned feeling. But now, the circulation of energy within the city had gained a sense of flexibility and smoothness. Ancient inscriptions appeared on the walls of the city, gathering the energy that all the cultivators channeled in. The Darkstar race naturally had their guard up against the 100 Saint City, the most powerful organization composed of foreign cultivators. As a result, the 10 armies stationed outside the city had increased to 5. Aside from the 5 armies, a large number of divine king realm cultivators had been mobilized from the 36 main cities as well. In the end, the Darkstar race's forces gathered outside the city had reached a level where they no longer needed to fear primordial realm formations. After all, the divine king Deathsworn possessed the might of the primordial realm through the formation was not truly the primordial realm. With enough divine king realm cultivators, it was not impossible to fend off the primordial realm. The commanders of the 5 armies gathered together as they stared at the majestic city that was only inches away, sternly. Naturally, they could sense the terrifying and enormous energy coming from the 100 Saints City. This caused the hearts of the commanders of the 5 legions to sink. They had a bad feeling. It looks like these foreign cultivators are up to no good. They want to make some trouble for us while we're conducting the ritual. The greatest use of the 100 Saint City is defense. The greatest threat that these foreign cultivators pose to us doesn't come from the city. Instead, it's the formation cast down by all the divine king realm cultivators working together. So, logically speaking, no matter how shocking the energy in the 100 Saint City is, it can only strengthen the defensive barrier. But why do I have a feeling of trepidation right now? The captains of the 5 legions stared at the 100 Saints City with a frown. There was a hint of uneasiness in their expressions. A few generals hurried over as well, standing behind the 5 divine king spirit of the 5 armies. Commanders, Something has probably happened in the Hundred Saints City. Let's report this to the higher-ups. The Hundred Saints City is clearly rather abnormal right now. Perhaps we've never truly understood the Hundred Saints City after all these years. Who knows, the Hundred Saints City might be hiding some impressive trump card. We have to report this to the Emperor as soon as possible. The generals all expressed their opinions. They were stationed here to prevent the foreign cultivators from charging out of the city. But the terrifying energy that radiated from the city vaguely made them feel like the situation was about to spiral out of control. This was because the Hundred Saints City was protected by a powerful barrier. The barrier was so powerful that even primordial realm experts would struggle to get through it, let alone divine king realm cultivators like them. As a result, even though they knew something had happened in the Hundred Saints City, as long as the foreign cultivators did not leave the city, all they could do was watch. There was nothing they could do. The Emperor is currently conducting the ritual, so he can't spare any attention, nor can he be disturbed. It's the same for the 10 divine halls. Let's wait and see, a commander said sternly. Boom! However, as they spoke, a muffled sound rang out from the Hundred Saints City. It was like thunder rumbling, causing the ground to tremble and space to explode. This was because, at this moment, the enormous energy source hidden in the depths of the 100 Holy City seemed to have broken free from all its shackles. Like a group of wild horses that had escaped their reins, they crazily poured out from the depths of the earth and quickly gathered in the sky above the 100 Holy City. The protective formation of the 100 Saints City suddenly vanished at that moment as well. As if it had lost its energy supply, the formation collapsed by itself. At the center of the convergence of energy, an illusory spirit body vaguely appeared. This was the artifact spirit of the 100 Saints City. It controlled all the energy in the city, preparing to unleash an astonishing strike with the power of the entire city. Although the city no longer had a protective formation, the 5 armies gathered outside the city retreated instead of advancing. They retreated again and again, retreating several dozen kilometers. All of them were filled with fear. This was because, at that moment, the energy pressure from the 100 Saint City was so powerful that it could even make primordial realm experts pale. Obviously, the Divine King would not be able to match up to it. In the face of this huge energy pressure, they couldn't even get close to the city, let alone attack it. Chaos Prime. Chaos Prime. Is this the legendary power of the Chaos Prime realm? That's impossible. That's impossible. It's impossible for the 100 Saint City to be so powerful. The 5 commanders were shocked. Their faces paled. Weapon Spirit, hurry up and bombard the 2-World Mountain. Create a safe passage through the 2-World Mountain and escort us out of here. Under the precise control of the artifact Spirit, the cultivators in the 100 Saint City were not affected much. A few prodigies called out excitedly. In the sky, the vague artifact Spirit seemed to sense everyone's prayers. It could not help but look in the direction of the 2-World Mountain. However, the artifact Spirit's eyes suddenly became conflicted. A sliver of green appeared in the depths of its eyes. Aye, there's the presence of the wood spirit ancestor there. I am a wood spirit. I can't disrespect my ancestor. The artifact spirit murmured in a voice that only it could hear. The green light in its eyes flickered, becoming stronger and weaker. Its conflicted expression became more and more intense. In the end, the greenness in his eyes disappeared, and his gaze became as pure as before. He muttered, "No, I'm not a member of the Wood Spirit clan. I'm just an artifact spirit that was born in this city. When I was born, the master who refined me fused the memories of a member of the Wood Spirit clan into my mind. I'm not a Wood Spirit. I'm just an artifact spirit born from this city. No, I'm not an artifact spirit. I'm a member of the Wood Spirit clan." Very quickly, the artifact spirit's eyes were once again replaced by a thick green hue. This time, the green hue was so strong that it completely annihilated all of its previous will. In the next moment, the artifact spirit suddenly looked into the distance. It stared in the direction of the royal capital from afar and said coldly, "It's the Dark Star race. It's actually the Dark Star race. The entire Dark Star race deserves to die. They deserve to die." The light in the artifact spirit's eyes became crazy. In the next moment, it fused with the energy of the 100 Saints city, turning into a 300-meter-long spear. It shot towards the royal capital with surging energy. The spear condensed the energy of all the cultivators in the 100 Saint city, as well as the tremendous source of energy that had been gathered for countless years beneath the city. In the end, the spear directly broke through the limits of Infinite Prime, reaching the level of First Heavenly Layer Chaotic Prime. Moreover, it was at the peak of the First Heavenly Layer. It was only a step away from becoming a Second Heavenly Layer Chaotic Prime. The spear tore through the air with a great commotion. The entire space of the Dark Star world shook violently. Wherever it passed by, space would be sliced open. A black crack would appear in the sky. Chapter 29:17. The artifact spirit of the 100 Saints city condensed all the power in the city into a single strike. Originally, it should have listened to their call and attacked the Two-World Mountain, opening up a safe path for them to leave. However, the artifact spirit went against their wishes. It condensed all their power and even all the power in the city into a single strike towards the royal capital of the Dark Star race. Everyone in the 100 Saint city was at a loss for what to do with the sudden change in the situation. However, when they understood the consequences of the artifact spirit's attack, all of them could not help but tremble. Their faces became gloomy. The imperial city of the Dark Star race was holding a very important sacrificial ceremony for the whole race. If the device spirit of the 100 Saint city offended the imperial city of the Dark Star race at this critical moment, it would be like poking a hornet's nest. It's over, it's over. It's completely over now. This god-damned artifact spirit has sent all of us into an abyss. Everyone in the city despaired. They had already lost all their power. Even with pills and divine crystals, it was difficult for them to return to their peak condition in a short amount of time. Moreover, the city had lost all of its defenses. It was completely exposed to the Dark Star cultivators. Under these circumstances, how were they supposed to stop the 5 armies and the many divine king experts outside the city? Oh no, they want to destroy our ceremony. The strike earlier must have reached the legendary level of chaotic primes. The 100 Saint city has actually used such a terrifying method to attack our royal capital. They deserve to die. All cultivators of the outside world cannot be forgiven. Outside the city, the 5 armies of the Dark Star race that had been forced several dozen kilometers away by the chaotic primes suddenly erupted with furious roars. Without a doubt, the artifact spirit of the 100 Saint city had angered the Dark Star race with its actions. It led to the fury and killing intent of every single Dark Star clansman. Immediately, the 5 armies moved together. All of them charged towards the 100 Saint city with surging, killing intent. At the same time, Siyu slowly absorbed the droplet of essence blood from the Grand Exalt in the royal capital of the Dark Star race. With every bit of the essence blood he absorbed, Siyu's presence became slightly stronger. The great power within the essence blood was no longer enough to damage Siyu's body. The light in Genshin's eyes flickered as he suddenly glanced towards the sky above the Dark Star race. At this moment, he could clearly sense that as the power of Siyu's Dark Star bloodline in Siyu's body rapidly strengthened, the sky and even the world silently underwent an indescribable, subtle change. Moreover, he was even more certain that the reason for this change was the strengthening of the Dark Star bloodline in Sacred Feather's body. Is this the remnant power of the Dark Star race's Grand Exalt? Or is it the Grand Exalt's will? Some sort of undying will after death? Genshin thought. However, at this moment his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he looked in another direction. A smear of surprise appeared in his eyes at the distant horizon. "How dare you?" At the same time, the Dark Star Emperor's face suddenly changed as he sat at the top of the Dark Star Divine Hall. His face that had remained composed the entire time was now filled with surging, baleful aura. With a bellow, the Dark Star Emperor vanished, appearing outside the royal capital as if he had teleported. It was also at this moment that a speck of light suddenly appeared in the distant horizon. The light expanded at an unbelievable speed, and in an instant it was as intense as the sun. With a terrifying might that could shake the heavens and earth, it pierced through the imperial city at a speed faster than lightning. Only powerful primordial realm experts could vaguely see that the light was actually a spear condensed from energy. It was several hundred meters long and gave off a devastating presence. It shot over from afar with indescribable speed. In the previous moment, it was still in the distant horizon, but in the next moment, it had arrived outside the 100 Saint City. What is this? A chaotic prime. This energy has actually reached the level of a chaotic prime. Impossible. How can such an expert appear in our clan? It's the 100 Saints City. It's the 100 Saints City behind this. God damn it, the 100 Saints City was actually hiding something so shocking. They want to ruin our grand ceremony. Bastards, once the grand ceremony is over, I'll definitely destroy the 100 Saints City, personally. Kuintian, the 100 Saints City has only survived until now because of your protection. You will not be able to absolve yourself of responsibility for this matter. The 10 halls were not calm either. The various hall lords roared out furiously with ugly expressions. Jia Di pointed his finger at Jianqin without any hesitation at all. Jianqin's face was filled with surprise. He ignored the other hall lords' accusations. Emperor, please ensure that the grand ceremony proceeds smoothly, or our many years of preparation and hard work will be wasted. Tian Xingxian's stern voice rang out in the Dark Star Emperor's head. The Dark Star Emperor said nothing. His face was stern, and his gaze was extremely cold. With a wave of his hand, a fist-sized royal imprint immediately appeared. It swelled with the wind, becoming several hundred meters long in a single instance. It shone with bright light as it directly collided with the spear with the might of a god artifact. Boom! With a deafening boom, the Dark Star Emperor's royal imprint was sent flying by the spear. With the obstruction, the energy of the spear weakened, but it did not dissipate. In particular, the figure of the artifact spirit of the 100 Saints City seemed to faintly appear in the spear. Its mind was clearly affected, causing it to go crazy. It actually left the 100 Saints City and charged out with the spear without fear of death, wanting to perish together with the Dark Star race. Dark Star race, you deserve to die. You deserve to be exterminated. The artifact spirit of the 100 Saints City let out a crazy voice. Its spirit body was becoming fainter and fainter. The power of the spirit body was fusing into the spear, causing the spear's might to increase. The artifact spirit's self-destruction caused the spear to temporarily replenish the energy it had lost when it collided with the royal imprint. Then the battle spear didn't slow down in the slightest as it continued to stab toward the Dark Star Emperor. The Dark Star Emperor was stern. Cold killing intent flickered through his eyes. With a wave of his hand, a huge, triangular shield descended from the sky, stopping the spear's advance. At the same time, his presence surged. Even though he was only a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, he gave off the impression that he was a chaotic prime. He spread his arms, and the energy on him immediately surged like a tsunami. He used his own energy to construct a powerful barrier outside the royal capital, preventing the shockwaves from reaching the royal capital and affecting the ceremony. Chapter 2918. The spear collided with the Dark Star Emperor's triangular shield, resulting in a deafening boom. A violent storm of energy swept through heaven and earth, destroying everything in its path. The triangular shield trembled violently. Even though it was a medium-quality god artifact, it had clearly been damaged, so it was still slightly weaker than a medium-quality god artifact in all aspects. As a result, the entire shield had basically run out of energy after taking on a strike from a chaotic prime. There was even a small crack that had spread across the shield. Behind the shield, the protective barrier set up by the Darkstar Emperor with his own cultivation became the final barrier to stop the energy storm. The protective barrier trembled violently, and its light rapidly dimmed. Bang! Right at this moment, another deafening explosion sounded. The power gathered in the palm of the Darkstar Great Emperor was so strong that it caused the space of the Darkstar realm to distort. Tiny black cracks were appearing non-stop. In the end, it ruthlessly smashed onto the battle spear. His strike was nothing to scoff at. It had already surpassed the limits of 9th Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes. It was no weaker than a 1st Heavenly Layer Chaotic Prime. The spear was knocked away by the Darkstar Emperor. It rapidly dimmed, and it rapidly shrank as well. It had shrunk from 300 meters to 10 meters. The artifact spirit's illusionary form within the spear had already become invisible. Only its eyes remained clear. At this moment, it was glaring at the Darkstar Emperor with undisguised hatred. This hatred was not directed towards the Darkstar Emperor alone. Instead, it was directed towards the Darkstar race, towards every single member of the Darkstar race. Darkstar race, even if I die, I'll take you down with me. Determination appeared in the artifact spirit's eyes that were filled with hatred. When the spear that had shrunk to 10 meters in length approached the Darkstar Emperor, it exploded loudly. Not only did the spear's energy explode, but it also contained the artifact spirit of the 100 Saints City. The entire spiritual body of the 100 Holy Cities artifact spirit drove all the remaining energy in the battle spear out in an instant. This was because it had no other choice. Although the spear condensed from all the energy in the 100 Saints City possessed the might of a chaotic prime, it was not a true chaotic prime after all. Its energy would decrease with every use, so it would lose its might after a few attacks. As a result, it could only drive all the remaining energy in the spear to self-destruct against the powerful Darkstar Emperor. Immediately, the entire Darkstar realm started to tremble. The might of the self-destruction of the artifact spirit could truly be said to be capable of destroying the world. Not only was space itself shattered by the explosion, causing numerous spatial cracks to appear, even the ground beneath their feet was blown into a bottomless abyss. The devastating storm of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings. The protective barrier that the Darkstar Emperor had cast down with his own cultivation shattered in a single instance. The storm of energy did not slow down at all, sweeping towards the royal capital like a hot knife through butter. The expressions of all the Darkstar cultivators in the royal capital changed drastically. Even the expressions of the leaders and vice-leaders of the 10 sacred halls completely changed at that moment. The storm of energy was equivalent to the self-destruction of a chaotic prime. It was just too terrifying, enough to make all the primordial realm experts change in expression. All the leaders felt powerless before this power that had surpassed infinite primes. Even the leader of the first hall, who had reached the 7th heavenly layer of infinite primes, was as insignificant as a boat in the ocean before the power of the explosion. He was unable to stop it at all. All he could do was barely protect himself. This was because this was the power of a chaotic prime. It was on a completely different level. It's over. At this moment, a despairing thought appeared in the minds of all the palace masters and deputy palace masters. They knew that once the storm of energy swallowed up the royal capital, the ceremony would definitely be destroyed. However, just when the storm of energy was about to engulf the royal capital, the Darkstar Emperor suddenly appeared. Even though he had endured the damage of the explosion, he clearly paid a certain price. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were tattered, and his face was pale. Most importantly, a streak of blood had appeared on the corner of the Darkstar Emperor's mouth. From this, it could be seen that the Darkstar Great Emperor was also injured by this self-detonation. Suddenly, the Dark Star Emperor struck out. His presence skyrocketed, and the energy within him surged out like a tsunami. He struck out with his hands, sending out palm after palm imprint. Every single palm imprint was condensed from dense energy, interwoven with the laws of the world. Every single palm imprint was several hundred meters wide. They surged with pressure, constantly weakening the incoming storm of energy when they came in contact with it. At the same time, the triangular shield suddenly expanded. It was as tall as the sky, even larger than the royal capital. It stood outside the royal capital like a towering shield. The royal seal that had been sent flying by the battle spear transformed into a beam of light and flew back. Instantly, it grew to the size of a mountain and landed on the ground with a majestic pressure. Similarly, it stood between the energy storm and the royal palace. A damaged set of armor flew out from the Dark Star Divine Hall. It shone with a gentle light that enveloped the entire royal capital. The light also possessed extremely great defensive abilities. In order to protect the imperial city and prevent the grand ceremony from being affected, the Dark Star Great Emperor had used all his means and abilities. Tian Shengxian looked in the direction of the Dark Star Emperor and murmured to himself, "With the Dark Star Emperor's strength, he can protect the royal capital and prevent the grand ceremony from being affected. However, this has created a great opportunity for Jianqin. However, I can't place all my hopes on Jianqin. It's time for me to make my final preparations." With that, a portion of Tian Shengxian's power actually split up from his illusionary figure before dispersing into thin air. No one in the entire Dark Star race sensed what he was doing at all. The power that Tian Shengxian had split up appeared above the 100 Saint City in a single instance, condensing into an illusionary figure again. The 100 Saint City is composed of many supreme quality saint artifacts. Through the gathering of formations, the saint artifacts have already become a single entity, forcefully pushing the city to the level of medium quality god artifacts. Even if the Dark Star Emperor has the battle prowess of a chaotic prime, he won't be able to reverse the situation by moving the entire city into the royal capital to self-destruct. At that time, not only will the entire royal capital be reduced to ashes, but the grand ceremony will be completely destroyed as well. However, the price of doing that is just far too great. After all, it's different from the artifact spirit of the 100 Saint City. Although I was the one who created the artifact spirit of the 100 Saint City, the actions of the artifact spirit have nothing to do with me. However, if I move the 100 Saint City to the imperial capital of the Dark Star race and blow it up, I'll be personally responsible for it. At that time, the power of the blood oath will definitely descend. Not only will this clone of mine completely disperse, but even my original body in the saints' world will suffer unimaginable injuries. Chapter 2919. Outside the royal capital of the Dark Star clan, the artifact spirit of the 100 Saint City had triggered all the energy within the city to self-destruct. It was like a surging sea, crashing into the royal capital of the Dark Star clan wave after wave. The Dark Star Emperor stood alone outside the royal capital. His presence surged as if he was a god that had descended to the mortal world. He blocked the oncoming storm of energy all by himself, making it so that the destructive storm that could destroy everything was unable to get past him. The ritual had reached a critical juncture in the royal capital. The droplet of essence blood from the Grand Exalt had completely fused with Siyu. As it increased Siyu's abilities in various aspects, it seemed to have changed Siyu's bloodline as well. As a result, no matter how one looked at him right now, Sacred Feather was a member of the Dark Star race through and through. Moreover, the power of his bloodline, faintly radiated from him, actually formed a faint pressure on all the people of the Dark Star race. After fusing with the Grand Exalt's essence blood, Siyu's bloodline had not reached the Grand Exalt's level, but he had managed to squeeze into the ranks of the Grand Exalt's descendants. The bloodline power emitted from its body was being transmitted non-stop through the Dark Star realm. It was spreading non-stop and assimilating into the world of the Dark Star realm. At the same time, it had also assimilated into the great Tao of the Dark Star realm. It seemed to have formed a sort of resonance, with a power hidden deep within the void. The power was supreme, as great as the sky. Its vastness and strength were indescribable with words. It was as if the power could destroy everything in the world with a flick of a finger. It could stand up to the laws of the world and make them retreat. However, the power was hidden in the depths of outer space. Even if one wanted to sense its existence, they needed to reach a certain condition. As for controlling or mobilizing it, that was even more difficult than reaching the heavens. Siyu could only use his presence to open a door hidden in outer space after fusing with the Grand Exalt's essence blood and reaching a certain level of bloodline. He could faintly sense the existence of the power and form a preliminary resonance with it. However, that was all there was to it. If the current him wanted to mobilize this power, it would still be a fantasy. Siyu sensed none of this because he was unconscious. He had lost all sense of the outside world. The critical moment has arrived. Jianqin, it's time for you to make a move. Otherwise, you'll have to watch this divine beast die in front of you. On the altar, the corner of Tian Xingxin's mouth that was hidden in the fog revealed a sinister smile. His eyes flashed with excitement and anticipation as he suddenly opened his mouth, his voice spreading throughout the entire city. Sacrifice the divine beast! As he spoke, Tian Shengxian waved his hand. Immediately, green blood, filled with vitality, was poured onto the altar. This was the blood of a life-devouring beast. From the residual energy in the blood, it had reached the primordial realm. At the same time, there were thousands of Dark Star clansmen in the 100 Saint City. They all took out jade bottles and opened them, spraying the life-sucking beast's blood into the air. Suddenly, a life energy, mixed with the aura of the Wood Spirit clan, filled the imperial city. It spread to the altar in the sky until it enveloped the entire altar. It was also at this moment that the supreme power hidden in the depths of outer space seemed to sense something as well. As if it had awakened from its slumber, a tremendous might gradually permeated the surroundings. Afterwards, the formation formed by the 10 divine halls and the Dark Star Divine Hall suddenly began to operate. The sacrifice of Siyu required the 10 divine halls and the Dark Star Divine Hall to complete. Once the sacrifice reached this stage, it would mean that Siyu was already on the guillotine. The formation formed by the 10 divine halls and the Dark Star Divine Hall was a blade. At this moment, the blade was about to fall. Boom! However, at this moment, a great rumble suddenly rang out. Accompanying the rumble was a powerful ripple of energy that caused the expressions of all the Vice Hall masters to change. It suddenly wreaked havoc between the 10 divine halls. The 5th divine palace of the 10 divine palaces seemed to have suffered an unimaginably heavy blow. It shattered into countless pieces in the air and fell from the sky. The 3 Vice Hall masters of the 5th hall, Bing Yuan, Taluo, and Doujin, were all stunned as well. They were blown far away by the shockwave from the force that destroyed the 5th hall. The power was just too powerful. It had completely reached the level of a high-level infinite prime. After destroying the 5th hall, the shockwaves wreaked havoc towards the other 9 divine halls and the Dark Star Divine Hall. The intense collisions caused all the divine halls to shake violently, swaying from side to side. All of them had shifted positions. The sacrificial formation had originally been cast down by the 10 divine halls and the Dark Star Divine Hall. Now that the 5th divine hall had been destroyed and the other divine halls had moved away from their original positions, the sacrificial formation was naturally destroyed. The sudden change stunned everyone in the 100 Saint City. The 9 hall masters and all the deputy hall masters of the Dark Star race were stunned. Looking at the shattered 5th divine palace, no one understood what had happened. As for the thousands of Dark Star clansmen who knelt below the royal capital, they were all at a loss. Some of them stared at the pieces of the 5th divine hall that fell from the sky and forgot to dodge for a moment. The moment the 5th divine hall shattered, Jianqin stepped through the air and arrived before the spatial furnace. His eyes were cold as Kuan-Tian's sword appeared in his hand, shining with dazzling light. Afterwards, Jianqin directly swung the sword at the spatial furnace. Kuan-Tian, are you crazy? What are you doing? Tian Shengxian cried out from the altar. He was both surprised and furious. Only at this moment did the 9 vice leaders discover that Jianqin had approached the spatial furnace. In particular, when they saw the extremely powerful sword in Kuan-Tian's hand swing towards the spatial furnace as hard as he could, all of them became utterly frightened. Kuan-Tian, what are you doing? Stop it now. Kuan-Tian, stop. You'll ruin the sacrificial ceremony. Kuan-Tian, don't. Stop. At that moment, the expressions of all the primordial realm experts who saw this changed. Disbelief filled their eyes. Kuan-Tian, stop. At the same time, the Darkstar Emperor's dignified and furious voice rang out from outside the royal capital. He used his full strength to disperse the shockwaves of energy before him before ignoring everything else. He returned to the royal capital as quickly as he could. Boom! Another deafening sound rang out in the sky above the royal capital. Jianqin ignored everyone's advice. An icy cold light flickered through his eyes as his sword shattered space, creating cracks one after another. In the end, he struck the spatial furnace viciously. Chapter 2920. Kuan-Tian. The Darkstar Emperor bellowed out furiously as flames of fury burned in his eyes. His presence surged into the clouds, forming a tremendous pressure that made all the primordial realm experts in the 100 Saints City shiver in fear. He moved extremely quickly. When Jianqin slashed through the spatial furnace, the Darkstar Emperor arrived on the other side as well. He directly extended his hand and suddenly clenched it in Jianqin's direction. He seemed to have mobilized the power of the world with his clench. Immediately, the laws of the world flowed as origin energy surged. Energy as tremendous as a river condensed in the surroundings, crushing down on Jianqin. The Darkstar Emperor was clearly completely enraged. Although he did not use his full strength this time, he did not hold back at all. As a result, basically no 6th heavenly layer infinite prime could block the strike. However, Jianqin's face did not change at all. Chaotic force circulated within him, filling his entire body in a single instance. He pushed the defenses of chaotic force to the limit, forcefully resisting the Darkstar Emperor's suppression with the toughness of his body. The Darkstar Emperor's suppression was extremely great. It caused the space around him to distort. Before the supreme power, Jianqin's bones cracked as if his entire body had shrunk. If it were any other 6th heavenly layer infinite prime from the Darkstar clan, their bodies would have shattered long ago under the suppression of such great power. It would be impossible for them to remain unscathed. Only Jianqin's chaotic body, which could be described as monstrous in terms of defense and regeneration, was able to endure it. The Darkstar Emperor's eyes immediately narrowed when he saw this. A sliver of surprise flashed through his eyes. He was extremely surprised that Kuan-Tian, who had just reached the 6th heavenly layer, could endure his power so easily. At this moment, Jianqin's god artifact sword shone with dazzling light again. With surging sword chi, he slashed out 3 times in a single instance. He struck out extremely quickly, completing it in a single instance. The 3 strands of light had basically fused together, illuminating the surroundings and ripping open space. In particular, the 3 strands of light possessed the might of a god artifact, as well as the destructive presence of chaotic force. In the end, the 3 strikes completely surpassed the 6th heavenly layer of infinite prime, reaching the 7th heavenly layer. The power was so great that even the leader of the first hall, who was publicly acknowledged as the greatest expert of the 10 divine halls, showed a drastic change in expression. How is Kuan-Tian so powerful? The leader of the first hall cried out involuntarily. In his senses, Kuan-Tian's strike seemed to be at the level of a 7th heavenly layer infinite prime, but it was actually equivalent to an 8th heavenly layer infinite prime. The expressions of the leaders of the 7th Hall, Jiadi, and the 4th Hall, Owen, who had clashed with Jianqin in the past, became extremely interesting at that moment. There was surprise, shock, confusion, but most of it was fear. They could sense just how shockingly powerful Kuan-Tian's 3 strikes were. It was not something they could contend against. Oh no! The leader has been affected by the remnant consciousness of the astral beast again. The astral beast's power must be erupting on him. Leader, wake up. Wake up. Don't lead to a disaster. Bing Yuan, Ta Luo, and Do Wujin hovered in the distant sky as they called out in panic. In the blink of an eye, Jianqin's 3 strikes collided loudly with a power that shocked all the primordial realm experts of the Dark Star race. Boom! A thunderous boom immediately rang out in the sky. The entire royal capital trembled, and huge cracks spread across the ground. The walls began to collapse. When the powerful ripples of energy fell from the sky, all the other hall masters and vice hall masters were pushed back, unable to stabilize themselves. As for the weaker Dark Star clansmen on the ground, they suffered heavy casualties. They had all died to the storm of energy. Jianqin cleaved through the power of the Dark Star Emperor's suppression with a single strike. Afterwards, Jianqin did not stop at all. He took a step forward with his sword and entered the spatial furnace immediately, arriving beside the unconscious Siyu. As soon as he entered the spatial furnace, Jianqin immediately sensed that the space within was different. Even though the spatial furnace had stopped operating, it still gave off a heavy heavenly might. This was the power of the world, or perhaps the power of the ways, or the power of the Dark Star world. It was likely that only a power of this level had the heaven-defying ability to change the world and alter Sacred Feather's bloodline. However, just when Jianqin entered the spatial furnace, the Dark Star Emperor entered as well. His eyes were filled with malice and fury. He was like an erupting volcano as killing intent surged. This was because he could already tell that Kuan-Tian was eyeing the divine beast. The divine beast was crucial to the grand ceremony. If it was lost, the grand ceremony would definitely fail. Moreover, Kuan-Tian's actions had an immeasurable impact on the grand ceremony. This had completely touched the Dark Star Emperor's reverse scale. For the first time in countless years, the Dark Star Emperor wanted to kill his own clansmen. Moreover, it was one of the upper echelons of the 10 Hall Masters. However, just when the Dark Star Emperor was about to use his full strength to kill Kuan-Tian, he suddenly discovered that Kuan-Tian's eyes had become incomparably dazzling. At the same time, a powerful sword chi that seemed to be able to sever the laws and ways and destroy the world and space suddenly appeared. The appearance of the sword chi immediately alarmed the Dark Star Emperor. A storm rose in his heart because he could sense a terrifying power that made his soul tremble from the sword chi. 2 tiny strands of sword chi the length of a finger silently appeared above Jianqin's head. The terrifying power that made the Dark Star Emperor's soul tremble came from these 2 tiny strands of sword chi. However, the 2 streams of sword chi appeared quickly and disappeared even faster. They were truly short-lived. As soon as they appeared, they disappeared without a trace in less than a breath of time. What disappeared along with them was the extremely shocking sword intent that swept through the sky. The Dark Star Emperor's eyes suddenly narrowed. At that moment, he was no longer able to remain composed. Surprise appeared on his face for the first time because he could already see the 2 strands of sword chi shooting towards him at an indescribably terrifying speed. The speed seemed to surpass the limits of time and space. Even Grand Primes would not be able to dodge the sword chi, let alone the Dark Star Emperor who had yet to truly become a chaotic prime. The 2 strands of sword chi silently burrowed into the Dark Star Emperor's forehead. All the protective measures that the Dark Star Emperor had set up before him were basically useless before the 2 strands of sword chi. They were completely useless. As the 2 strands of sword chi shot out, Jianqin quickly became haggard. The 2 strands of sword chi had instantly drained half of the power of his soul, so he immediately felt dizzy. Jianchen endured the dizziness and grabbed Siyu, placing him in the divine hall he carried with him. The process was extremely smooth, without any accidents. Only when he saw Siyu lying in the divine hall, quietly did Jianchen finally let out a sigh of relief. Although Siyu's condition was unknown, and he had no idea whether it was good or bad, he had saved him at the very least. Afterwards, he looked at the Dark Star Emperor, and killing intent immediately filled the air. He was filled with malice. The Dark Star Emperor was not as heavily injured as he had expected after being struck by the 2 strands of profound sword chi. His body trembled violently before he calmed down. A small bronze lamp that was only an inch tall slowly floated out from the top of his head. A flame burned on the bronze lamp, shining with hazy light that enveloped the Dark Star Emperor. At the same time, it protected his soul. Chapter 29-21. Jianchen frowned. He looked at the bronze lamp that hovered above the Dark Star Emperor's head and felt pity. Ever since he had cultivated the profound sword chi, it had always been successful. No one could stop it wherever it went. Even experts who were a major cultivation realm higher than him were powerless before the profound sword chi. They could only take it head-on. Yet today his profound sword chi was blocked before the Dark Star Emperor for the first time. Moreover, it was blocked when he had used 2 strands of profound sword chi. Logically speaking, 2 strands of profound sword chi were enough to injure the souls of any first heavenly layer chaotic prime, let alone the Dark Star Emperor who had yet to truly become a chaotic prime. His cultivation remained at the 9th heavenly layer of infinite prime. However, in Jianchen's eyes, the Dark Star Emperor's soul was basically unscathed right now. It was only slightly affected. He actually possesses a god artifact that can block attacks of the soul. Jianchen could not help but become stern. He could already tell that the Dark Star Emperor's bronze lamp was very, very special. It seemed to only have a single use, which was to protect the soul. It could block all attacks of the soul. The profound sword chi was naturally a type of attack of the soul. Now that the Dark Star Emperor was protected by the bronze lamp, Jianchen's profound sword chi immediately became useless. Moreover, he could tell that the bronze lamp had already fused with the Dark Star Emperor's soul. As long as the bronze lamp remained, the Dark Star Emperor's soul would never disperse. He had basically formed a coexistence with the bronze lamp. As long as the lamp existed, he would exist. The bronze lamp is actually a high-quality god artifact, let alone 2 strands of profound sword chi. Even if I use 4 strands of profound sword chi, I won't be able to shake it at all. This is because my profound sword chi is still too weak. It's only the 4 strands I condensed back when I was at sword spirit. Only when my comprehension of the way of the sword reaches the great achievement or perfection of the way of the sword and condenses the 7th or even 8th strand of profound sword chi will my attacks be able to break through the bronze lamp's defense. After all, only Grand Primes can smash through high-quality god artifacts, and they have to be high-quality Grand Primes, Jianchen thought as his expression became ugly. The existence of the bronze lamp made him understand that he could not kill the Dark Star Great Emperor no matter what. At most, he could destroy the Dark Star Great Emperor's physical body, but not the origin spirit. He's just an infinite prime, yet he actually possesses such a heaven-defying, life-saving method. Just the bronze lamp is enough to make all the grand primes of the saints' world fight over it madly. As expected of a race that once gave birth to a grand exalt, their heritage really is great. At that moment, even Jianchen felt rather envious of the Dark Star race. On the other side, the Dark Star Emperor stared straight at Jianchen. His face was filled with shock, disbelief, and surging fury. With a cold voice, he gritted his teeth and said word by word, "You are not Kuan Tian at all. Speak. Who are you? You. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" In the end, the Dark Star Emperor roared out the words, "Who the hell are you?" His voice rumbled like thunder, echoing between the heavens and the earth, echoing in the imperial city. Not only did his voice carry a monstrous fury, it also carried a sense of extreme insanity. The mighty leader of the Fifth Hall, an important figure only second to him in the Darkstar race, had actually been impersonated and replaced by an outsider before he knew it. Moreover, the person had been disguised before him for so long without him noticing. This was just too great of a blow to the Darkstar Emperor. Moreover, Jianqin had saved Siyu and placed Siyu in a divine hall that he carried with him. As a result, Siyu's presence vanished from the world of the Darkstar race in the end. Without Siyu's presence, the remnant power of a grand exalt hidden in the depths of the Darkstar race gradually vanished as well. It could be said that most of the ceremony had failed now that it had progressed to such a state. The series of events drove the Darkstar Emperor mad with fury. His fury surged endlessly, enough to obliterate space and make people lose their rationality. What? He's not Kuan-Tian? The current Kuan-Tian isn't him. How is this possible? Impossible. This is impossible. If he's not Kuan-Tian, who is he? It's impossible for cultivators from the outside to enter the Darkstar world to be so powerful. Within the royal capital, all the people of the Darkstar race fell into an uproar because of what the Darkstar Emperor had said. In particular, the Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters of the 10 Divine Halls, who had interacted with Jianqin many times before, were all in disbelief. The Darkstar Emperor's words had a huge impact on their minds. It was like a bolt of lightning on a clear day, stunning all of them. It's impossible for him to be Kuan-Tian. It's impossible for Kuan-Tian to be so powerful, and Kuan-Tian's way of the sword is nowhere near as powerful and sharp as this person. Most importantly, the shocking sword intent that suddenly appeared has completely exceeded all of our understanding. It's impossible for Kuan-Tian to possess such an ability, and it's impossible for us to possess such a powerful, secret technique, said the Hall Master. His face was extremely ugly, and his voice was extremely heavy. The gaze in his old eyes became extremely terrifying, as if he wanted to flay Jianqin alive. He shouted coldly, "Tell me your true identity. Who are you?" The remaining 8 Hall Masters didn't say anything, but their expressions changed rapidly. In fact, when the first Hall Master's analysis came out, and they connected it to Kuan-Tian's recent actions, they were already certain that the person in front of them was not Kuan-Tian. "Who are you? Who are you? Why do you have Kuan-Tian's divine artifact? What have you done to Kuan-Tian? Tell me, what have you done to Kuan-Tian? Where is the real Kuan-Tian?" Feng Shui's body trembled violently. Her face was filled with pessimism and despair. She seemed to have descended into madness. With a shriek, she lunged towards Jianqin in the sky like a madwoman. "I don't care who you are. Hand over the divine beast." It was also at this moment that the Darkstar Emperor bellowed out. A baleful aura surged from him as killing intent surged. He directly launched his most powerful attack towards Jianqin. He threw a punch, unleashing the battle prowess of a chaotic prime. It ripped through space. The punch was vicious and brutal, arriving before Jianqin in a single instance. At the same time, a royal seal flew over. It became the size of a small mountain and hovered in the air. It radiated with a shocking pressure that crushed down on Jianqin. Jianqin had sensed the royal seal before, but the feeling it gave him this time was completely different. The Darkstar Emperor had no intentions of harming Jianqin last time. He controlled the power of the royal seal perfectly, suppressing Jianqin without injuring him at all. Chapter 29-22. Jianqin did not dare to be careless when he faced an attack from the Darkstar Emperor, who was equivalent to a chaotic prime. He unleashed his full strength without holding back at all. The chaotic Niden in his dantian that seemed to have reached the limits of his current cultivation level began to revolve rapidly as well, surging with chaotic force. Endless light condensed around Jianqin. In the end, all of it gathered on the sword in his hand, and he stabbed out as hard as he could. Boom! The The sword collided with the Dark Star Emperor's fist with surging light, producing a great boom. A devastating storm of energy surged out, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. Feng Shui, who had charged out of the 10th hall recklessly, was the first to be affected by the shock waves of energy before she could even approach Genshin. She immediately grunted, and instead of advancing, she was pushed down uncontrollably by the shock waves. In particular, there were some fragmented sword chis mixed in with the energy shock waves. Although they had already been shattered, they were still extremely sharp. They easily pierced through Feng Shui's protective energy and left bloody scars on her delicate body. Feng Shui, retreat quickly. A battle at this level is not something we can interfere in. Don't worry, the Emperor will definitely capture this person and force Kun Tian's whereabouts out of him. A hall master comforted her from below, but even he sighed inside. Kun Tian's armor and sword had already ended up in someone else's hands. Would Kun Tian still be fine? The Dark Star Emperor's punch was heavy and powerful. It actually gave Genshin an irresistible pressure. When the fist collided with the sword, the light on the sword immediately shattered. Perhaps because it was damaged to a certain extent, a crack immediately appeared on the sword from the Dark Star Emperor's punch. Moreover, the cracks continued to spread. Soon, they covered the entire sword. In the end, with a bang, the sword shattered into countless fragments. Just a single punch had shattered a god artifact. After shattering the sword, the Dark Star Emperor's punch showed no signs of exhaustion. It continued onwards like a hot knife through butter, piercing Genshin's protective light before landing on Genshin's chest with great force. With the heavy sound of flesh colliding, Genshin's entire chest caved in. He could not help but fly backwards. However, the seal fell from above his head. The tremendous pressure from the seal seemed to form a restraining force. In the end, Genshin, who should have flown very far away, only retreated 3 meters before he was locked in place by the seal's restraining force. Genshin bellowed out furiously as the chaotic force within him surged. His chest, which had caved in from the Dark Star Emperor's punch, immediately returned to its original state. His wounds completely healed at that moment. He swung his fists, throwing them at the sky time and time again, colliding with the descending seals in the most violent manner possible. Immediately, thunderous booms rang out in the sky. Genshin's chaotic body and chaotic force fused together. He used the power of the laws of the sword to launch his most powerful attacks. Every single punch would crack space, and every single collision was like a thunderclap. Just the terrifying sound waves alone shattered the ground below and destroyed the walls of the royal capital. Countless Dark Star clansmen lost their hearing as they bled from their orifices. The collisions between Genshin and the Dark Star Emperor were just too violent. Many of the vice leaders struggled to fend them off, retreating time and time again. However, even with Genshin's full strength, he was unable to stop the seal. This was because the power the seal possessed had also surpassed the 9th heavenly layer of Infinite Prime, reaching the level of Chaotic Prime. Genshin's repeated attacks only weakened the seal slightly. Bang! In the end, the seal landed heavily on Genshin with an irresistible force. Genshin grunted as his organs shook violently. His vitality churned as a sliver of blood flowed out from his mouth. Afterwards, the seal fell from the sky with Genshin, smashing into the ground heavily like a mountain. It immediately vanished, sinking into the depths of the ground. Even though Genshin's battle prowess was extraordinary, where even the leader of the first hall admitted defeat, there was clearly an insurmountable gap between him and the Dark Star Emperor. Originally, Genshin had the profound sword chi. Once he used it, he could even put up a fight against first heavenly layer chaotic primes. However, the Dark Star Emperor just happened to possess the bronze lamp that protected his soul. Once the lamp appeared, Genshin's profound sword chi became useless. In the sky, the Dark Star Emperor's face was cold. Without saying anything, He took a step and entered the depths of the ground as well. He wanted to take back the divine beast and continue the ritual. Now that the ritual had been severely damaged, the chances of failure had increased drastically. However, as long as the divine beast was returned to him, there would still be some hope of success. This directly affected his chances of becoming a chaotic prime, as well as the fate of the entire Dark Star race. Even if there was only a sliver of hope, the ritual had to continue. However, as soon as the Dark Star Emperor entered the pit created by the seal, he was stunned. He actually could not sense Jianshin's presence at all. Jianshin was no longer in the pit. At almost the same time, an explosion rang out from the Dark Star Divine Hall. The teleportation formation on the huge square suddenly shattered, forcefully destroyed by a powerful strand of sword chi. Jianshin had already appeared above the Dark Star Divine Hall at a certain time. The Dark Star Emperor snorted coldly from underground and charged out in a single instance. He charged towards Jianshin with the might of chaotic elements, approaching him in a single instance. However, at this moment, the laws of space pulsed around Jianshin, and he suddenly vanished. He appeared above the first divine hall like he had teleported. Before the hall master could react, he stomped down heavily on the first divine hall. The entire first divine hall shook violently. A huge crack appeared beneath Jianshin's feet, spreading out in all directions like a spiderweb. The teleportation formation of the first divine hall suffered an even more powerful attack, shattering loudly. After the teleportation array, the structure of the first divine palace, floating in the sky, could no longer remain intact due to too many cracks. Then the entire first divine palace collapsed just like that. Although the 10 divine halls, including the Dark Star Divine Hall, were god artifacts, they were all damaged. Even after being repaired, it was difficult for them to return to their original state. With Jianshin's current strength, it was not difficult for him to destroy the 10 divine halls that were low-quality god artifacts apart from the Dark Star Divine Hall that was a high-quality god artifact. After destroying the first divine hall, Jianshin did not stop at all. He continued towards the second divine hall, and with a wave of his hand, he shot out huge strands of sword chi. Every strand of sword chi was white and shone with blinding light. They shot towards the remaining divine halls at the same time. "How dare you!" The Dark Star Emperor's face was frosty. Killing intent surged in his eyes as he immediately lunged at Jianshin. Chapter 29-23. A sliver of hesitation flashed through Jianshin's eyes when he sensed an urna charging towards him. Jianshin felt some pity for this person who had once stood by his side against the combined pressure of the 5 divine halls. But very quickly the hesitation in his eyes vanished completely and was replaced by indifference. He would never forget how the Dark Star race had treated Siyu. Not only had they stripped away all of Siyu's essence blood, but they had even wanted to sacrifice Siyu's life in the end so that they could have a chance at breaking through to a higher level of cultivation. Jianshin had long since become unforgivable in his eyes. Even if he had to wipe out the entire Dark Star race, Jianshin would not find it excessive at all. Jianshin's eyes immediately became filled with killing intent when he thought of that. With a wave of his hand, he shot out a strand of sharp sword chi, stabbing it mercilessly towards an urna. With a boom, an urna was forced back by Jianshin's sword chi. He was sent flying and slammed into a building of the second divine hall. His face reddened. After repelling an urna, Jianshin arrived before the teleportation formation of the second divine hall. He struck out with his palm and dense energy surged out, shattering the teleportation formation. At the same time, the teleportation formations of the third divine hall, fourth divine hall, ninth divine hall, and 10th divine hall all boomed. They had all been destroyed by Jianshin's sword chi. Only the 6th divine hall and the 7th divine hall managed to block Jianshin's sword chi with their full strength. It did not affect the divine halls at all. The teleportation formation of the 8th divine hall was the only place that had not been attacked by Jianshin. "Die, bastard!" The Dark Star Emperor was already furious. He rapidly approached Jianqin. Just when he was about to attack, Jianqin did not want to tangle with him at all. The laws of space pulsed around him, and he vanished as if he had teleported. He arrived at the fourth divine hall in a single moment. As soon as he appeared, he struck out before the sixth hall master could react. He struck at the teleportation formation with his palm. Boom! The teleportation formation of the sixth divine hall was destroyed as well. As he watched Jianqin destroy teleportation formation after teleportation formation and divine hall after divine hall, the Dark Star Emperor immediately became furious. With a wave of his hand, the royal seal flew out from the ground and hovered above the royal capital with an endless power of suppression. It seemed like it wanted to seal up the entire capital, locking up the space there and restricting Jianqin's laws of space. Immediately, the space became viscous like glue. No matter where they moved, they would feel like they were in a swamp. The laws of space were affected as well. However, this effect was negligible to Jianqin because his laws of space did not come from his own comprehension. Instead, it came from the spatial insect emperor. As a result, his usage and control of the laws of space had already surpassed primordial realm experts who comprehended the laws of space through their own comprehension. Spatial insects were exotic beasts born from space. They were born with the ability to control space, and spatial insect emperors were the kings of spatial insects. Jianqin had absorbed the soul of the spatial insect emperor. Although his control over space had not reached the same level as the spatial insect emperor, he possessed some charm at the very least. As a result, his compatibility with space was extremely high. Silently, Jianqin vanished once again. He had left his original spot through the laws of space. The seal in the air constantly radiated with a suppressive force. It was unable to stop him at all. In the next moment, a great rumble rang out from the seventh divine hall. The teleportation formation there had been easily destroyed by the elusive Jianqin. Die, wretch! Heaven Stabilizer Bell. The hall master of the seventh divine hall called out, as if he had already expected Jianqin to appear here. He did not care whether the teleportation formation was still intact or not. Instead, he had been secretly preparing a powerful secret technique. As a result, the Heaven Stabilizer Bell instantly took form the moment the teleportation formation was destroyed. It shot towards Jianqin with lightning speed. This was the second time Jianqin had witnessed the power of the Heaven Stabilizer Bell. The first time was when he fought Jia Di as Kuan Tian. Back then, he had to hide his strength, so he pretended that he was temporarily trapped by the bell. But now, Jianqin jabbed a finger at the sky. Surging sword light shot out as destructive chaotic force permeated the surroundings. It collided with the Heaven Stabilizer Bell. This time, the Heaven Stabilizer Bell was like a jar, shattered by Jianqin's sword chi. Afterwards, Jianqin used the laws of space to instantly appear before Jia Di. With a flash of sword light, he stabbed towards Jia Di mercilessly. Jia Di wore a suit of armor and wielded a god artifact. He was in his most powerful battle form. He shone with dazzling golden light and surging flames. He used the laws of metal and the laws of fire at the same time, striking out with his full strength. Boom! With a great rumble, Jia Di's laws of metal were immediately dispersed. The roaring laws of fire were reduced to sparks that scattered into the surroundings. Spurt! Jia Di paled, and blood sprayed from his mouth. He staggered backwards. Every single step was extremely heavy, causing the seventh divine hall to shake. He has the laws of space. Let's keep him busy together and stop him from fleeing. The leader of the first hall called out. The presence of a seventh heavenly layer infinite prime erupted, pressing towards Jianqin aggressively. He could already tell that Jianqin's battle prowess had weakened after losing the amplification of the god artifact. He was not undefeatable. Immediately, Anna and Owen charged towards Jianqin with the leader of the first hall. They formed an encirclement with Jia Di. They wanted to keep Genshin busy and make some time for the Darkstar Emperor. The 3/6 heavenly layer and 1/7 heavenly layer expert did not hold back at all. They radiated with powerful presences that crushed down on Genshin. The tremendous pressure of energy disturbed the space as much as possible in an attempt to obstruct Genshin's laws of space. Speak. Where is Kuan Tian? The leader of the 10th Hall, Feng Shui, was sorrowful. She also charged towards Genshin recklessly. At this moment, all the leaders of the 10 divine halls took action. They could sense that Genshin's battle prowess had plummeted after losing his god artifact. Even though they were still not his opponent in a one-on-one battle, they could still put up a fight against him with so many of them working together. At the very least, they could delay him for a while so that he could not use the laws of space and time. However, they had completely underestimated just how compatible Genshin was with the laws of space. Even when they all did their best to disturb the space, and even worked together to make it fluctuate and unstable, they were still unable to stop Genshin from using the laws of space. Genshin mysteriously vanished once more. He used the laws of space to change the battlefield, preventing them from coming into contact with him. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the teleportation formation of the 8th Divine Hall. You've finally come. The Emperor has not waited for you here in vain. However, at this moment, the Darkstar Emperor's cold voice rang out. He also appeared in front of the teleportation formation, standing very close to Genshin. This was the Darkstar Emperor's true body. When Genshin deliberately destroyed the teleportation formation, the Darkstar Emperor had used a secret technique to conceal himself and lurked in front of the teleportation formation of the 8th Divine Hall. As for the other figure that had appeared in front of everyone, it was equivalent to a clone. At this moment, the clone was also dissipating. Who the hell are you? A cultivator from the outside world? But no matter who you are, the Emperor will pull out your tendons and flay your bones. The Darkstar Emperor let out a bone-chilling voice. He struck out with his palm, and the chaotic primordial might that emanated from his palm directly froze the space and imprisoned the world. You think you're so smart? Do you really think I don't know you're lurking here? Genshin said coldly. He formed a sword with his fingers and stabbed out. When the sword stabbed out, his essence, chi and spirit, and even his entire person, seemed to have completely integrated with the space. A small half of his arm, together with the dazzling sword chi, seemed to have pierced into the void and entered another world, not appearing in this world. Shadowless life, reaping sword. The Darkstar Emperor's face suddenly changed. At this moment, he discovered, to his shock, that a powerful strand of sword chi had strangely entered his body and slashed down viciously. Immediately, powerful sword chi erupted, and the Darkstar Emperor's internal organs were heavily injured. His chi and blood surged, and strands of sharp sword chi penetrated his body from the inside out, piercing his skin and bursting out from the inside. Immediately, the Darkstar Emperor's body seemed to be nurtured with countless strands of sword chi, constantly shooting out from his body. His body trembled violently, and his face was filled with disbelief. Spurt. Finally, the Darkstar Emperor spat out a mouthful of blood. He had been injured by the strike. What kind of ability is this? The Darkstar Emperor cried out involuntarily. His face was filled with shock as his heart churned. He staggered backwards, and the palm strike he sent towards Genshin had lost its power due to the sudden injury, so he pulled it back. It was too strange and too miraculous. This sword chi actually completely ignored all of his defensive measures and completely ignored the difference in cultivation level. It was as if it had come from a different space and directly appeared inside his body, making it impossible to guard against. Although the Darkstar Emperor had vomited blood, Genshin did not rejoice at all. Instead, he sighed secretly because he knew that although he had heavily injured the Darkstar Emperor with the shadowless fatal sword, the injury was not fatal. With my current strength, I still can't threaten a chaotic prime. Genshin sighed inside. The Dark Star Emperor was just too powerful. If it were any other ninth heavenly layer infinite prime, they would have suffered unimaginable injuries, even if they did not die from the shadowless fatal sword. The Dark Star Great Emperor, on the other hand, could only inflict superficial wounds on him. Dark Star Emperor, I will return. I still haven't settled my grievances with your Dark Star clan, Genshin said to the Dark Star Emperor emotionlessly with a cold face. With that, he turned around and vanished into the teleportation formation. Afterwards, the space around the teleportation formation shook violently. Chaotic spatial force wreaked havoc. An entire region of space suddenly collapsed. The teleportation formation of the 8th Hall was completely shattered by the collapse of space. Chapter 29-24. With the destruction of the last teleportation formation, the intense battle in the royal capital of the Darkstar clan finally came to a halt. This was because the many experts of the Darkstar race had lost track of Genshin. They had no idea where Genshin had fled to. Although the great battle had stopped, the chaotic energy storm that permeated the sky did not completely disappear. It turned into numerous hurricanes that wreaked havoc in the sky above the Imperial City. They shuttled through the Imperial City and destroyed countless buildings. Dust rose into the sky and covered the entire land. The battle in the royal capital today was definitely the most intense battle of the highest level ever since the Darkstar race had entered the miniature world of the Darkstar world. A battle between primordial realm experts could be described as devastating. Genshin's battle with the many primordial realm experts of the Darkstar race had basically reduced the majestic and bustling royal capital to ruins. The towering walls in the surroundings had all collapsed, and nothing in the city remained intact. Even a few of the 10 divine halls that represented authority and status in the Darkstar race that always hovered in the sky had been destroyed. This loss, this blow, was extremely great to all the Darkstar clansmen. Sigh, this person has already fled the royal capital with the divine beast, and he's skilled in the laws of space. Catching him now is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Now that things have developed to this point, this ritual, Sigh, it's really our race's misfortune to have such a powerful foreign cultivator sneak in at such a crucial moment. Is this the will of the heavens, or is this the undying will of the grand exalt of the wood spirit race? In the sky, on the altar, Tian Shengshan hung his head dejectedly as he sighed incessantly. His voice was filled with regret and unwillingness, as well as a deep sense of powerlessness that anyone could clearly sense. Furthermore, at that moment, his illusory body appeared to have become even fainter. As a result, it was rather difficult to tell whether Tian Shengshan's change was because he had taken too much energy from the ritual or because he had suffered a backlash from the failure of the ritual. In the 8th Hall, the Darkstar Emperor, the 10 Hall Masters, and all the Vice Hall Masters had gathered here. They were all staring at the damaged teleportation formation with fury burning in their hearts. Some of them even had deep resentment in their eyes. At this point, all of them knew in their hearts that the grand ceremony had been a complete failure. Their grand wish of becoming a chaotic prime could no longer be fulfilled. Feng Shui was also not far away. Her expression was sorrowful and dejected. A martial artist from the outside world. That person must be a martial artist from the outside world. A deputy palace master said through gritted teeth, "He's far too powerful. If he were a member of the Darkstar tribe, he would have definitely been famous for tens of millions of years, or even longer. It's impossible for him to remain unknown all this time. Only a martial artist from the outside world can explain his existence, but martial practitioners of the outside world who are over 1,000 years old can't enter our Darkstar race at all. That's impossible. This person is not even 1,000 years old. Impossible. His strength is so strong that he can even contend with a great emperor. How can such a terrifying expert be less than 1,000 years old?" The deputy palace masters no longer remained calm. They were all shocked. The 3 deputy palace masters of the 5th Hall, Bing Yuan, Ta Luo, and Do Wujin, remained silent. They were in low spirits, as if they had suffered a heavy blow. Search for him. Send out everyone. Even if we have to flip the entire Darkstar world upside down, we have to find him, the Darkstar Emperor said coldly. He basically gritted his teeth. In the past, he was completely at ease before all the upper echelon of the Darkstar race. Nothing could affect him. Even if a mountain collapsed, he would not bat an eyelid. However, the Darkstar Emperor's sunken face and cold gaze, filled with killing intent, made all the upper echelon of the Darkstar race shiver. The 10 Deputy Palace Masters and Deputy Palace Masters all felt bitter inside. Not only was the martial artist from the outside world terrifyingly good at disguising himself, but his battle prowess was terrifying as well. Coupled with his grasp of the laws of space, finding someone like that in the Darkstar world was like finding a needle in a haystack. Moreover, there was the two-world mountain in the Darkstar world that they could not set foot in easily. If that person had fled into the two-world mountain, how were they supposed to find him? It was not just a slim chance anymore. Instead, it was hopeless. However, at this moment, all the Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters present, including the Darkstar Emperor, changed in expression. Afterwards, all of them could not help but take out a medallion from their space rings. At this moment, all the medallions shone with dazzling light as they flickered rapidly. Their expressions immediately changed when they saw the medallion. Oh no, it's the medicinal garden. The formations in the medicinal garden are warning us. The medicinal garden is under heavy attack. It's the martial artist from the outside world. It must be him. He's in the medicinal garden. God damn it. How does he know about the existence of the medicinal garden? Ah, we're done for. He already knows many of our secrets. Bastard, this person is far too much of a bastard. He purposefully destroyed the teleportation formation for the medicinal garden in the end. He's trying to delay us from reaching the medicinal garden. Above the 8th Divine Hall, the expressions of all the primordial realm experts changed drastically. They were extremely worried. The medicinal garden was one of the greatest treasures of their Darkstar race. If anything happened to it, it would be a huge loss. This was because many of the god-tier heavenly resources in there had been nurtured over a long period of time and a tremendous amount of divine crystals. They were all important cultivation resources to primordial realm experts, so they could not afford to lose them. The Darkstar Emperor had already vanished. He turned into a blur as he rushed towards the medicinal garden with lightning-like speed. Behind him, all the Deputy Palace Masters and Deputy Palace Masters followed closely. They all used their full strength to fly towards the medicinal garden as quickly as possible. The royal capital was extremely far away from the medicinal garden. Even with the speed of primordial realm experts, they would need quite some time to travel. In the past, they had teleportation formations, so they could directly reach the medicinal garden through them. Now that the teleportation formations had been destroyed, they could only fly over obediently. This was because only the 10 Divine Halls and the Darkstar Divine Hall possessed teleportation formations that led to the medicinal garden. On the other side, powerful pulses of energy wreaked havoc in an extremely remote and unknown region of the Darkstar race. Jianqin hovered above the medicinal garden as his sword shone brightly. He was attacking the medicinal garden as hard as he could. Every single attack from him was extremely vicious, causing the protective formations around the medicinal garden to tremble violently. Each attack would consume a large amount of the formation's energy. The Darkstar Emperor had personally cast down the formation that protected the central region. Its defenses were so great that they could block the attacks of 9th Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes. However, the energy that supported the formation was not endless. As a matter of fact, it did not even have a lot of energy stored up. As a result, even though Jianqin failed to destroy the formation personally after a few attacks, he forcefully depleted all the energy within the formation, causing it to collapse by itself. Immediately, the central region of the medicinal garden was exposed. Without the formation's restraint, the surging energy condensed there immediately dispersed in all directions. Chapter 29:25. Jianchen was overjoyed as he stared at the fruit of ways that was in the process of breaking through. He seemed to see his breakthrough in the way of the sword as he stared at the fruit of ways. Not only are the formations in the garden for protection, but they're also for surveillance. From the moment I attacked the formations, the upper echelon of the Darkstar race knew where I was. They'll come as soon as possible. I don't have a lot of time left. It's extremely urgent. I can't waste a single moment. Hopefully, I'll be able to break through quickly, Jianchen thought. With a wave of his hand, 3 white jades immediately flew out of his space ring and hovered around the fruit of ways. The jades were the ones that Jianchen had obtained from the heavenly Thunder Clan that contained the laws of time. As the power of the laws of time radiated from the jades, the small space immediately blurred and the flow of time suddenly accelerated. Due to the influence of the flow of time, the fruit of ways that had been slowly breaking through accelerated as well. With that, the energy in the garden immediately decreased rapidly, forming a huge vortex of energy that was absorbed by the fruit of ways. The pure energy that had dispersed because Jianchen had broken through the formations suddenly surged back at that moment, turning into a storm of energy that burrowed into the fruit of ways. At that moment, the rate at which the fruit of ways absorbed energy could only be described as terrifying. This was because the space where the fruit of ways resided had sped up, so the rate at which the fruit of ways absorbed energy naturally increased at the same rate. The divine crystals stored in the garden decreased at an unprecedented rate. The several 100 million supreme grade divine crystals that Jianchen had just replenished had been depleted in a short amount of time. All of this was within Jianchen's expectations. The 100 Saint City had contributed several 100 billion supreme grade divine crystals to him. Even though he had already used up some of them, there was still plenty left. Jianchen wandered through the various regions of the garden. Every time he waved his hand, he would sprinkle several 100 million supreme grade divine crystals to replenish the space. However, this time he didn't just fill up the 5th, 6th, and 7th sacred halls with divine crystals. He also filled up the remaining 7 sacred halls with divine crystals. This was because the energy required for the advancement of the Tao-bearing fruit was simply too great. If the central region couldn't satisfy it, the surrounding 10 herb garden regions would absorb the energy. Therefore, in order to ensure that the Tao-raising fruit had sufficient energy for advancement, Jianchen had no choice but to be responsible for supplying all the energy to the entire medicinal garden. 3 time crystals is too slow. With the Darkstar Great Emperor's strength, even if he flew all the way here from the royal city, it wouldn't take him too long. According to the current cultivation speed of the Tao birth fruit, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult to complete the breakthrough before the Darkstar Great Emperor arrives. I wonder if the flow of time will be faster if I use a few time crystals? Jianchen sank into his thoughts as he stared at the time crystals around the fruit. Soon after, he acted on what he thought, immediately tossing out 3 more time crystals. The 6 time crystals released the laws of time within them at the same time. Jianchen observed from the outside. Even though he was unable to accurately determine just how much time had been sped up, he could clearly sense that it had increased. Time acceleration has increased by about 5 levels. Moreover, the amount of time essence consumed by each crystal is also reduced compared to the amount of time essence consumed by 3 crystals. Jianchen's eyes lit up slightly. He immediately threw in another 3 time crystals, so there were a total of 9 time crystals around the Tao birth fruit. The 9 time crystals released the power of the laws of time together, distorting space. As a result, the flow of time around the Tao birth fruit had reached an astonishing level. It was basically 1,000 years in a single instance. 9 time crystals are only around 2% faster than 6 time crystals. The acceleration of time seems to have reached the limit. Even if I throw in more time crystals, the flow of time won't increase. It'll only prolong the time. Jianchen frowned slightly. He felt a sense of urgency. If the Tao birth fruit failed to advance before the Dark Star Great Emperor arrived, it would without a doubt lead to many variables. He had the laws of space and the chaotic body. Although he could not defeat the Dark Star Great Emperor, leaving would not be an issue. Most importantly, he was afraid that the Dark Star Great Emperor would harden his heart and destroy the Tao birth fruit if he couldn't obtain it himself. If a chaotic prime was determined to destroy the Tao birth fruit, Jianchen would not be able to stop him with his current strength. Afterwards, Jianchen constantly moved through the various regions of the garden, replenishing the divine crystals and maintaining the supply of energy. The tremendous amount of divine crystals he had obtained from the 100 Saints city rapidly decreased. He had already used up 18 of the 30-time crystals he had obtained from the Celestial Thunder Clan. He only had 12 left. An hour later, what Jianchen worried about happened in the end. The Dark Star Great Emperor arrived in the area of the garden before the Tao birth fruit ripened. From very far away, the Dark Star Great Emperor's furious and murderous presence could be sensed from the distant horizon. Aside from the transforming Tao birth fruit, all the God-tier heavenly resources the Dark Star Great Emperor had nurtured had entered Jianchen's space ring. Only a few of the less valuable heavenly resources that had not matured were left. Jianchen could not be bothered to pick them, allowing them to grow in the garden. It's still come in the end. The rate of advancement of the Tao birth fruit is getting faster and faster. I need to stop the Dark Star Great Emperor. Jianchen sighed inside when he sensed the Dark Star Great Emperor's presence. With a wave of his hand, several tens of billions of supreme, grade divine crystals fell into the garden, forming a small mountain around the Tao birth fruit. Then he took out the remaining 12-time crystals in his interspatial ring and suddenly disappeared. He had already left this place using the laws of space. Thousands of miles away from the herb garden, Dark Star the Great's face was ashen, and his aura was monstrous. He was rapidly approaching the herb garden at lightning speed. The 10 Hall Masters and the Deputy Hall Masters couldn't keep up with Dark Star the Great's speed and were left far behind. However, at this moment, a huge strand of sword chi suddenly appeared above the Dark Star Great Emperor's head. As if it had fused with space, it directly stabbed towards the Dark Star Great Emperor, ignoring the limitations of distance. The Dark Star Great Emperor bellowed out, and surging energy erupted from his body. It formed a thick layer of protective energy in a single moment. When the streak of light struck the protective energy, it immediately slowed down. However, the Dark Star Great Emperor directly ignored the streak of light. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched the space above him. Bang! Space was punched through by the Dark Star Great Emperor's punch. The entire region of space pulsed violently. As black cracks rapidly spread, Jianchen was forcefully forced out. Chapter 29-26. The Dark Star Emperor did not hold back at all, using his full strength right from the start. His battle prowess that was equivalent to a chaotic prime erupted in the surroundings. Every single strike possessed devastating power. Jianchen completely lost the upper hand against the Dark Star Emperor in an open confrontation. He was not the Dark Star Emperor's opponent at all. The sword chi he condensed was shattered by the Dark Star Emperor's punch. Afterwards, their fists collided in the surroundings like two stars colliding. With a deafening boom, large swathes of space collapsed. The sleeve on Jianchen's right arm was immediately reduced to dust. His entire right arm spasmed in an extremely abnormal manner before rapidly becoming bright red. Blood, that possessed the presence of chaotic force, seeped out from his pores. The Dark Star Emperor's punch was just too powerful. The attack of a first heavenly layer chaotic prime was not something Jianchen could deal with right now. After clashing with it forcefully, the flesh in Jianchen's right arm was reduced to pieces. His meridians were severed, and the bones in his hand cracked. He was blown away by the great force. The Dark Star Emperor stood as still as a mountain. His presence surged like a streak of light, making him invincible. He immediately followed up with another attack, punching through space as a devastating attack approached Jianqin. This time, Jianqin did not choose to receive it forcefully. He vanished extremely suddenly, directly ignoring the spatial suppression from the royal seal. At the same time, his chaotic force surged into his right arm wildly. The supreme recovery of the chaotic body was unleashed to the limit, and his heavily injured right arm immediately recovered at an unbelievable rate. Afterwards, the space around him pulsed slightly, and he controlled space again, changing his position like he had teleported. Basically, the moment Jianqin vanished, the space where he had been suddenly collapsed. The space in a range of 30 meters shattered instantly. The Dark Star Emperor slowly appeared in the shattered space. His face was pale white. Afterwards, the Dark Star Emperor launched a barrage of attacks. He swung his fist constantly, and the powerful force pierced through the sky, causing the surroundings to shake. Jianqin, on the other hand, relied on the laws of space to constantly change his position and engage in a skirmish with the Dark Star Emperor. He knew very well just how huge the gap between him and the Dark Star Emperor was. The profound sword chi was useless against the Dark Star Emperor, and the shadowless lethal sword could only cause some superficial wounds to the Dark Star Emperor. In short, with his current means, he could not pose any threat to the Dark Star Emperor. During the fight, Jianqin displayed the space laws to the extreme. Facing the Dark Star Great Emperor, the space laws instead became his greatest reliance. Fortunately, my laws of space come from the Spatial Insect Emperor, so it's extremely compatible with space. Otherwise, if it were any other primordial realm expert who comprehended the laws of space, they would struggle to do anything in this space filled with storms of energy. Their usage of space would definitely be greatly hindered, Jianqin thought. His main objective was not to defeat the Dark Star Emperor. All he needed to do was keep the Dark Star Emperor busy for a while. However, even with that being the case, Jianqin was still in danger several times. The Dark Star Emperor had cut off space, forcing him to clash with the Dark Star Emperor directly. Every time they clashed, Jianqin would become quite injured. On the other side, the Dark Star Emperor became more and more furious as he faced the slippery Jianqin, who used the laws of space to dodge around. He gradually lost his patience. Suddenly, the Dark Star Emperor stopped chasing Jianqin around. Instead, he stood in the middle of the battlefield and began to form seals with both hands, using a powerful secret technique. Immediately, the tremendous might of the world appeared. The energy of the entire Dark Star world gathered wildly, and Jianqin felt like his presence had been locked onto by the might of the world. He was unable to avoid it. A god-tier battle skill. Jianqin's face changed, and the light in his eyes immediately flickered. The might of a god-tier battle skill used by a chaotic prime was unimaginable. Even the Dark Star Emperor was helpless against Jianqin's laws of space. As a result, he was forced to use a god-tier battle skill when he possessed an absolute advantage. He wanted to use the might of the world to lock onto Jianqin and prevent him from retreating. If he were in the royal capital, the Dark Star Emperor would never have dared to use a god-tier battle skill because it was just too powerful. Once he used it, the entire royal capital would be razed to the ground. Now that he was in the wilderness, he naturally did not have to worry about that. Do you think you can do whatever you want before the Emperor just because you have the laws of space? The Dark Star Emperor said through gritted teeth. The might of the world surged as energy surged. The entire sky of the Dark Star world distorted violently as the god-tier battle skill charged up. In the end, the Dark Star Emperor's god-tier battle skill condensed into a huge, dark star in the sky. It gave off a tremendous pressure as if it possessed the power of ways and the power of laws. It directly fell towards Jianqin. Jianqin's presence had already been locked onto by the Dark Star. Even with the laws of space, he was unable to break free from the pursuit of the God-tier battle skill. He was truly unable to avoid it. There was only one path before him, and that was to receive it head-on. However, even with his chaotic body, he would not be able to endure the God-tier battle skill of a chaotic prime. Even if he did not die, he would be severely injured. Jianqin did not become flustered at all. His eyes became extremely bright as he stared at the dark star that fell from the sky with devastating might. He smiled for some reason. "A God-tier battle skill is useless against me," Jianqin murmured. His supreme will of the way of the sword surged into the sky, and he immediately sensed the connection between the God-tier battle skill and the laws of the world. The connection between the Dark Star Emperor's God-tier battle skill and the laws of the world is clearly much stronger than Kuan Tian's. This should be due to his strength. However, it's still not enough to stop me. Jianqin's supreme will immediately turned into a sharp blade, severing the connection between the God-tier battle skill and the laws of the world without any hesitation. Immediately, the Dark Star that the Dark Star Emperor had conjured with his God-tier battle skill was like a deflated balloon. All of its pressure vanished in a single moment. In the end, it turned into a ball of pure energy, reduced to the most ordinary attack. Even though the ball of energy was not to be underestimated, it was unable to pose any threat to Jianqin after losing the presence of the God-tier battle skill. Most importantly, it allowed Jianqin to break free from being locked onto by the God-tier battle skill. With a flash, Jianqin had already changed his position through the laws of space. The dark star that had lost the might of the God-tier battle skill slammed into the ground heavily. The eruption of chaotic prime energy caused the ground to shake. Chapter 29-27. The Dark Star Emperor was indeed shocked. The God-tier battle skill he used was a clan-protecting technique passed down from generation to generation, so its power was unfathomable. Just the God-tier battle skill alone was enough to allow him to kill people at a higher cultivation level than him. Originally, in the Dark Star Emperor's opinion, using a God-tier battle skill against Jianqin, who was nowhere near as powerful as him, was already overkill. If it were not for the fact that he was truly helpless against Jianqin's laws of space, he really would not have been willing to use a God-tier battle skill. However, he never would have thought that the divine-tier battle skill he had made up his mind to use after careful consideration would lose all of its heavenly might in the next moment. As a result, the divine-tier battle skill that was originally powerful enough to destroy the world turned into the most ordinary of energy. This was just too unbelievable. The Dark Star Emperor knew that this was definitely not a problem with his God-tier battle skill. It was definitely because the person before him had used an unbelievable ability to nullify his God-tier battle skill. This left him extremely shocked. Their Dark Star race had obtained quite a lot of information regarding the Saints' world from cultivators in the outside world through various means. They even knew a little about some of the more top-secret information. Without any exaggeration, the Dark Star race had a very good understanding of the Saints' world, even though they had been trapped in the Dark Star world for countless years. However, the Dark Star Emperor had never heard of Jianqin's ability to nullify a God-tier battle skill. This was because he understood the terror of such an ability far too well. A God-tier battle skill was a huge trump card to any cultivator. It was a trump card that could save their life at crucial moments. If he grasped a method that could nullify a God-tier battle skill, did that not mean that all the experts he faced off against would lose their trump card in the future? Thinking about it carefully, the Dark Star Emperor finally understood just what kind of threat the cultivator from the outside world who had interrupted the ritual of the Dark Star race possessed. To be able to reach such a level in less than 1,000 years. Killing intent surged in the Dark Star Emperor's eyes, but he refused to give up. The energy in his body surged, and as it was drained rapidly, he once again performed a divine level battle skill. The way he deciphers divine battle skills is definitely not as simple and casual as he appears to be. Perhaps every time he deciphers a divine battle skill, it will take a huge toll on him. The Emperor does not believe that he can keep deciphering it. The Dark Star Emperor had also made up his mind. The divine tier battle skill consumed too much energy. Moreover, the divine tier battle skill he used was infinitely close to the mid-tier. Even though the energy in his body had become extremely dense after countless years of accumulation, he couldn't support it more than a few times. Suddenly, a boundless pressure spread out. The Dark Star Great Emperor's divine battle skill was ready in an instant. However, this time, it wasn't a dark star that appeared. Instead, it condensed into a divine sword that emitted dazzling light, exuding a world-destroying might. Jianqin sneered. He immediately condensed the will of the ultimate way of the sword into a sword and slashed at the connection between the divine tier battle skill and the great way of the world. It was like a string had been severed. Without the connection with the great way of the world, the divine tier battle skill immediately lost all of its divine might and its power plummeted. Humph, Emperor, let's see how many times you can break it. The Dark Star Emperor's eyes shone fiercely. He was not discouraged at all, and he performed the divine tier battle skill for the third time. The third time, a huge hand of energy appeared in the sky. It blotted out the sky as if it could suppress the universe with a flip of its hand. The fourth time, a huge eye appeared out of thin air. When the eye opened and closed, it emitted a might that could annihilate all life. The fifth time, the divine tier battle skill actually summoned the blurry figure of the Grand Exalt of the Darkstar clan. Even though it was formed from energy, the sound of the Great Way revolved around it. It possessed the pressure of the Great Way of the world, causing the 3,000 laws to ripple to varying degrees. The appearance of the Grand Exalt's figure did indeed make Jianqin shiver. However, it was still a battle skill after all. It only relied on the various charms of the Great Way of the world. When Jianqin severed the connection between the two, the divine tier battle skill immediately became like a toothless tiger. It seemed shocking, but its power had actually plummeted. The Dark Star Emperor had used a total of 5 different divine tier battle skills, which surprised Jianqin just how many divine tier battle skills the Dark Star Emperor had grasped. He believed that this was not all of the divine tier battle skills the Dark Star Emperor had grasped. He had nullified all 5 divine tier battle skills with the will of the ultimate way of the sword. Fortunately, my ultimate way of the sword can suppress divine tier battle skills, or I really wouldn't have been able to keep the Dark Star Emperor busy, Jianqin thought. After this clash, he had already understood that he could ignore divine tier battle skills below chaotic primes. He could nullify divine tier battle skills used by first heavenly layer chaotic primes as well. However, as his opponent became stronger, the connection between the divine tier battle skill and the great way of the world would definitely become even more powerful. Once he reached that level, it remained to be seen whether he could still nullify it so easily. You nullified the Emperor's divine tier battle skill without expending any energy at all. The Dark Star Emperor did not continue to use the divine tier battle skill. Using it 5 times in a row had taken a huge toll on him. Of course, most importantly, he discovered that he seemed to have been wrong. He could tell from Jianqin's expression that nullifying his divine tier battle skill did not seem to be as difficult as he had imagined it to be. Such a consumption is almost negligible for me. Dark Star the Great, do you want to try other divine level battle skills? The Dark Star Emperor did not continue to attack, so Jianqin stopped as well. He maintained a distance from the Dark Star Emperor as he faced him. The Dark Star Emperor squinted his eyes as they shone with chilling coldness. He said emotionlessly, "If you want to leave, the Emperor really won't be able to stop you, but you just don't leave. Instead, you're fighting a battle that you have no chance of winning against the Emperor. You're just stalling for time." Jianqin was not surprised that the Dark Star Emperor had guessed his intentions. He smiled. "Dark Star Emperor, don't you want to know why I've become enemies with your Dark Star race? The Emperor will naturally get to the bottom of this, but right now, the Emperor won't let you succeed. You're delaying the Emperor because you're using the 30 jades that contain the laws of time to accelerate the Tao birth fruit. Kuan Tian, oh Kuan Tian, you've really hidden yourself well. When the Emperor heard that you obtained the 30 jades, he believed it to be true. He thought you were collecting them for research purposes. Who would have thought that your ultimate goal was actually the Tao birth fruit that my race has been nurturing for countless years? Humph. Since the Tao birth fruit cannot be used by my race, the Emperor will not give it to an outsider, even if he has to destroy it. With that, the Dark Star Emperor turned into a streak of light and rushed towards the herb garden with great speed, completely ignoring Jianchen. Chapter 29-28. There's only a little bit of time left before my fruit of Wei ripens. I have to stop him, Jianchen thought. With determination in his eyes, he suddenly vanished. The Dark Star Emperor was very fast, but he was still incomparable to Jianchen, who had grasped the laws of space. With a pulse of space force, Jianchen had already crossed a great distance and appeared before the Dark Star Emperor, as if he had teleported. As soon as he appeared, he suddenly stabbed out with a powerful sword chi. The Dark Star Emperor had already seen through Jianchen's intentions. He did not pause at all as he directly punched out with his iron fists. As for Jianchen, he had already used the laws of space to change his position the moment the Dark Star Emperor struck out. He silently appeared behind the Dark Star Emperor and sent out another sword chi with a flash of light. As soon as the Dark Star Emperor shattered Jianchen's first sword chi with his iron fists, he suddenly sensed the attack from behind him. Without any hesitation, he erupted with thick protective energy, forming a powerful barrier around him. When the sword chi came into contact with the barrier, it immediately slowed down. Even though it was only for a split second, it gave the Dark Star Emperor some time to react. He immediately turned around and punched back, shattering the sword chi behind him. However, after shattering the second sword chi, the Dark Star Emperor suddenly felt a great sense of danger. A streak of sword light silently appeared to his side. It was like a nimble viper flicking its tongue, suddenly stabbing over with lightning speed. Spurt! The sword light pierced through Dark Star the Great's protective energy and left a bone-deep wound on his waist, from which red blood flowed out. The Dark Star Emperor completely ignored the wound on his waist. He suddenly bellowed out and struck out with his palm, shattering a large portion of space. However, there was no trace of Jianchen at all. Suddenly, the sense of danger appeared again. Above the Dark Star Emperor's head, a dazzling sword chi shot out from the void and pierced towards his head. The Dark Star Great Emperor was furious. He didn't expect that while he was traveling at full speed and distracted, this foreign cultivator, who was completely weak in his eyes, would actually injure him. Who was he? The Dark Star Emperor was a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime. He was the undisputed greatest expert of the Dark Star clan, boasting that he could take on chaotic primes. Yet he had been injured by someone who was far weaker than him. This was definitely the greatest humiliation of his life to the Dark Star Emperor, because he himself was an invincible existence. However, just as the Dark Star Emperor was about to shatter the sword chi above his head with a punch, his face suddenly changed. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The blood was mixed with pieces of his organs. This was because the strange strand of sword chi that he had experienced in the royal capital had actually broken through all of his defenses once again, appearing silently and directly attacking his organs. What kind of ability is this? The Dark Star Emperor was astounded. He really was unable to do anything about the sword chi that had suddenly entered his body. He could not find a way to deal with it because the sword chi could ignore all energy barriers and protective treasures. It seemed to have emerged from another space, appearing inside his body without any prior signs. It was impossible to guard against. The Dark Star Emperor already felt great fear towards Jianchen's shadowless fatal sword. This was because he understood that although the shadowless fatal sword could not injure him too much right now, its power would definitely increase as Jianchen's strength increased. In the future, when Jianchen reached the same level as him, would he still be able to endure the attacks from the shadowless fatal sword? Due to this delay, The sword chi that had appeared above the Dark Star Emperor's head had already fallen. It was only a foot away from the top of his head. The sword chi was about to strike the Dark Star Emperor's head at any time. But at this moment, the fist-sized royal seal suddenly appeared. It hung above the Dark Star Emperor's head, blocking the path of the sword chi. With a boom, the sword chi struck the royal seal. The royal seal did not budge, but the sword chi dispersed on its own. Jianqin appeared before the Dark Star Emperor. His body seemed to fuse with space at all times. He seemed to flicker in and out of existence, sometimes clear and sometimes illusory. He seemed like a cloud of smoke that could disperse at any time. His usage of the laws of space had reached a level of perfection. This was not something he had gained through training. Instead, it was an innate advantage he possessed after absorbing the soul of the spatial insect emperor. It's just a pity that my comprehension of the laws of space is too low. Many of my usage and attacks with the laws of space are useless against the Dark Star Emperor, thought Jianqin. His current comprehension of the laws of space was around the level of a second heavenly layer infinite prime, so he could only use the laws of space to change his position and attack with the laws of the sword when he faced an expert like the Dark Star Emperor who was on par with chaotic primes. The laws of the sword were his most powerful attack right now. If his comprehension of the laws of space surpassed the Dark Star Emperor's level, he only needed to use the laws of space to change the distance between them, and he would be able to trap the Dark Star Emperor here for a long time. He would not be able to escape even after several years. Dark Star Emperor, you can't be distracted when fighting. Although I'm not as strong as you, I can still injure you. If you continue like this, I might still have a sliver of hope to kill you here. Jianqin stood before the Dark Star Emperor as he smiled faintly. However, when he reached the end, his voice became especially cold, and killing intent surged in his eyes. At this moment, a powerful pulse of laws suddenly appeared from the distant medicinal garden. Gazing into the distance, the sky in the distance had even become azure blue. The fruit of ways is about to ripen. Jianqin and the Dark Star Emperor both saw this, and their hearts skipped a beat. Humph, just you? Piss off, Emperor. The Dark Star Emperor did not waste any more time. He roared out furiously, and the shrunken royal seal above his head summoned a triangular shield that hovered behind him. He directly charged towards Jianqin like a tiger. Stay! Jianqin bellowed as well. The fruit of ways was about to ripen, so it was a race against time. Afterwards, he broke free from space. His body shone brightly as the chaotic force within him surged wildly, turning him into a huge sword. He stabbed towards the Dark Star Emperor with surging sword chi. The Dark Star Emperor punched out, clashing violently with the sword light. A thunderous boom immediately rang out. This was one of the few times that Jianqin had used his full strength against the Dark Star Emperor since the beginning of the battle. A single clash caused space to crack and the ground to collapse. Violent energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings, destroying everything. Jianqin was blown away by the Dark Star Emperor's punch. The sword light around him dimmed as he vomited blood. He was heavily injured. The Dark Star Emperor forcefully came to a halt as he charged towards the medicinal garden. He could not help but stagger 3 steps back as surprise filled his eyes. What a powerful body! What rapid regeneration! With your abilities, you definitely aren't ordinary, even in the Saints' world. Who are you? Afterwards, the Dark Star Emperor shook his head and said coldly, It doesn't matter who you are. You've ruined the grand ritual of my clan. Your crimes cannot be forgiven. Once the Emperor destroys the fruit of ways, even if we have to mobilize the entire clan and use the supreme curse left behind by our ancestors, we will kill you completely. Chapter 29:29. After muttering, the Dark Star Emperor ignored Jianqin, who had been sent flying by his punch, and continued to fly towards the herb garden. He knew that Jianqin's spatial laws were miraculous. Even if he pursued him, Jianqin could still use the spatial laws to escape. The nascent Tao fruit was the key. He was very clear about the effects of this item. A nascent Tao fruit that had perfectly transformed into a high-grade divine fruit could not fall into the hands of this outsider, no matter what. On the other side, Genshin's figure that had been sent flying suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, his injuries had mostly healed. He still rushed towards the Darkstar Emperor with sword chi that filled the sky. He wanted to delay the Darkstar Emperor and buy time for the nascent Tao fruit. Because the nascent Tao fruit was still in the process of transforming, it had not fully matured. However, with the time acceleration of the 30 crystals, the transformation speed would be shortened countless times. Therefore, he only needed to delay the Darkstar Emperor for a moment. When the color reflected in the sky turned into an incomparably gorgeous multicolored light, it would be the moment the nascent Tao fruit truly matured. An ant trying to shake a tree. You're overestimating yourself. The Darkstar Emperor growled, and the royal seal floating above his head immediately flew out to meet Genshin. However, just as the royal seal was about to hit Genshin suddenly changed direction and appeared on the other side, forcing the Darkstar Emperor to retaliate with a punch. Bang! With a muffled sound, the sword chi was shattered by the Darkstar Emperor's punch. However, this time it was pure sword chi, and Genshin's figure was nowhere to be seen. The next moment, in another direction, Genshin's real body suddenly emerged from space and delivered a fatal blow like a venomous snake. The Darkstar Emperor waved his fist again and again. While shattering Genshin's attack, he also sent Genshin flying far away. Similar scenes repeated themselves. The nascent Tao fruit was about to ripen, so Genshin could no longer care about the price he had to pay. He completely paid the price of being injured to keep the Darkstar Emperor busy. He had no idea how many attacks he had endured. The Darkstar Emperor's attacks were just too violent. Every single strike would leave him heavily injured. If it were not for his chaotic body's extremely tough defenses and shocking recovery, he probably would not have been able to last until now. However, after paying such a price, the effect was very obvious. The Darkstar Emperor's advance was slowed down. The Darkstar Emperor was secretly furious. He became more and more shocked by the strength of the chaotic body because, at that moment, Genshin was basically unkillable in his eyes. He could not kill him no matter what. No matter how heavily injured he was, he could recover rapidly. Whenever he thought he could not last any longer, he would appear before him with the laws of space again. Moreover, he did not seem to have lost much of his battle prowess. If he did not stop him, he would even pose a threat to the Darkstar Emperor. During that time, the Darkstar Emperor even used his God tier battle skill again. Originally, he thought that Genshin would not be able to nullify his God tier battle skill since he was heavily injured. However, the Darkstar Emperor was disappointed. He used the God tier battle skill again against the heavily injured Genshin, but it was still useless. As soon as the God tier battle skill appeared, it immediately deflated like a balloon, losing all of its power. On the other hand, the Darkstar Emperor was greatly exhausted from using the God tier battle skill again and again. He had also tried to use the Royal Seal and the Triangular Shield to stop Genshin, preventing him from stopping his advance. However, Genshin's laws of space were just too elusive. The two God artifacts were unable to protect him completely, so there would always be openings. In the end, Genshin used these openings to attack, forcing the Darkstar Emperor to block him. Genshin's wounds became heavier and heavier. Most of his flesh and blood had vanished. As a matter of fact, only his exposed bones could be seen from half of his body. Many of his bones had completely shattered. He was just too heavily injured, to the point where it was impossible to look straight at him. The recovery of the chaotic body was nowhere near enough to keep up with his injuries, and the Darkstar Emperor was gradually approaching the garden. In the end, he was unable to completely stop the Darkstar Emperor from approaching the medicinal garden. He could only slow him down temporarily. 8 million kilometers, 5 million kilometers, the Darkstar Emperor drew closer and closer to the medicinal garden. Very soon, he was only 2 million kilometers away. However, with the Dark Star Emperor's battle prowess that was equivalent to a chaotic prime, he could destroy the medicinal garden from a distance of 1 million kilometers with his great power. Genshin's heart sank slightly when he saw the Dark Star Emperor gradually approach the medicinal garden in an unstoppable manner. If the Fruit of Ways had not broken through, then so be it. He could have just taken it and left. Although medium grade was not as good as high grade, it would still be extremely helpful to him. However, the Fruit of Ways had already begun to break through when he discovered it. Once it began, there was no turning back. It would be destroyed if it did not succeed. This was similar to an expert breaking through to a major realm of cultivation. Once they were disturbed by external forces, they would suffer a huge backlash. They would suffer unimaginable injuries, or even die because of this. At this moment, multicolored light suddenly surged into the distant medicinal garden. The entire sky was dyed into a resplendent world of multicolored light. Within the light that filled the sky, there was an extremely pure energy of the great path circulating. It seemed to have resonated with the 3,000 great paths in the world, causing the great path to manifest. It was like numerous divine chains of order were interwoven together, and it emanated the sound of the great path that was like a great bell. It was magical and profound. The Fruit of Ways has ripened. Jian beamed when he saw the 5-colored light in the horizon. This was finally the moment he had been waiting for. Without any hesitation, he immediately abandoned the Dark Star Emperor and flickered. Every time he flickered, he would teleport, crossing great distances with each flicker. He hurried over as quickly as he could with the laws of space. However, he was still 2 million kilometers away from the medicinal garden. Even if Genshin traveled at full speed with the laws of space, he would still need a few seconds to cover this distance. Oh no, the Fruit of Ways can't fall into his hands. The Dark Star Emperor's face changed drastically. Before an expert who was proficient in the laws of space, he knew that it would be very difficult for him to catch up and snatch the Fruit of Ways first. Helpless, he could only grit his teeth. The next moment, he began to burn his essence blood. He finally made up his mind to burn his essence blood at the cost of self-harm to use a unique secret technique to summon the past glory of the royal seal. He formed a series of seals with both hands, and at the same time, he spat out a beam of blood-red light from his mouth, dyeing the fist-sized royal seal red. The royal seal was originally a medium-quality god artifact. However, it had been severely damaged in the past. Not only was its power reduced to less than 10%, even its artifact spirit had disappeared. However, when the Dark Star Emperor spat out a mouthful of essence blood and the seals he formed vanished from the royal seal, the royal seal seemed to awaken from its slumber. Immediately, it shone brightly as powerful energy directly ripped through space, causing the surrounding space to sink into darkness. After absorbing a mouthful of the Emperor's essence blood, the royal seal seemed to return to its golden age. It shone with the unique light of a medium-quality god artifact, illuminating the entire world. A medium-quality god artifact was a god artifact that belonged to chaotic primes. As a matter of fact, even some grand primes who were in rather dire straits still possessed medium-quality god artifacts. I never thought that the Emperor would actually be forced into a corner like this. The Dark Star Emperor sighed gently. The Dark Star Emperor sighed softly. Losing his essence, blood, made him look a little tired. Then he pointed with his finger, and the dazzling seal instantly disappeared. No, the royal seal did not vanish. Instead, it moved through space at a speed that surpassed Genshin's, heading straight for the medicinal garden. The royal seal's current speed was truly comparable to a living chaotic prime. It vanished with a single step, traversed a world with a single step. It was extremely fast. Even if Genshin used the laws of space to travel as quickly as he could, he would not be able to match the speed of a chaotic prime. He was immediately surpassed. After all, the primordial chaos realm was a higher level of existence. This kind of existence would experience a qualitative leap in all aspects. In the vast cosmos, primordial chaos experts could even travel alone and catch up to void spaceships. Although the Dark Star Emperor possessed the battle prowess of a chaotic prime, that was only battle prowess. He did not possess the various abilities that chaotic primes possessed. For example, the Dark Star Emperor's comprehension of laws remained at the 9th heavenly layer of infinite prime. His cultivation also remained at the 9th heavenly layer. His speed and level of existence were naturally the same as well. As a result, he was slower than Genshin in terms of speed. However, it was different for chaotic primes. In just a few seconds, the royal seal arrived above the medicinal garden first. It turned into a huge mountain in a single moment, crushing towards the ground with a destructive force. It shattered space. On the other side, Genshin used the laws of space to the limit as he hurried towards the medicinal garden with lightning speed. At the same time, he shot out strands of sword chi, which shot towards the royal seal with great speed in an attempt to slow it down. However, the royal seal possessed the might of a medium-quality god artifact, after all. The power of a medium-quality god artifact was not something that Genshin could shake right now, so his sword chi was useless. The royal seal rapidly descended. It gave off a tremendous pressure, causing all the plants in the garden to prostrate themselves. With this speed, Genshin would not be able to reach the medicinal garden before the royal seal. At this crucial moment, a third strand of profound sword chi appeared between his eyebrows. Genshin did not know if the profound sword chi would work, but he could only try. As soon as the profound sword chi appeared, it immediately surged into the sky before turning into a streak of light that broke through the restraints of space and time. It ignored the distance between them and struck the royal seal in a single moment. The royal seal immediately trembled violently as it flickered with light. It shook violently in the air. 2 million kilometers away, the Dark Star Emperor only felt his head hum as if he had been struck by an invisible hammer. His connection with the royal seal actually became extremely fragile at that moment, as if it could be severed at any time. Fortunately, this only lasted for a short moment before he recovered. However, in that moment, Genshin had successfully entered the medicinal garden. With a wave of his hand, the fruit of ways landed in his hand. In the next moment, it vanished, having been stowed away in his space ring. Boom! Chapter 2930. Through the connection he established with the royal seal, Dark Star Emperor could clearly sense that Genshin had not escaped through the laws of space after being hit by his royal seal. This made him, finally, heave a sigh of relief. Only at this moment did Yan Kai suddenly wake up and discover that his killing intent towards this outer world cultivator had unknowingly risen to such an impatient level. This was no longer just because of the outer world cultivator's crime of destroying the grand ceremony. After this period of battle, Dark Star Emperor deeply understood how difficult it was to deal with and kill the outer world warrior. His opponent's strength was clearly far inferior to his, but he could last so long in his hands. In addition, his opponent also had a strange secret technique. Not only could it break his divine level battle skills, but it also made the divine level battle skills he had spent a long time to comprehend completely useless. There was also the sword chi that could ignore all his external defenses and directly appear in his body. Every single one of the methods mentioned above possessed mysterious and unfathomable abilities. Now that they were all gathered on a single person, it directly raised the terrifying level of this person to a level that even the Dark Star Emperor was shocked. It brought him an unprecedented great threat. Fortunately, he's dead after all. Dark Star Emperor let out a long sigh of relief. However, he immediately recalled Genshin's undying body and immediately felt uncertain. Because along the way, Genshin had suffered unimaginable injuries several times. Even his skull had been cracked. He had suffered several fatal injuries that Dark Star Emperor thought were almost certain death. But in the end, In the end, he appeared in front of him again in a short while. His vitality was really too tenacious. It was simply a miracle. As he thought about it, Dark Star Emperor, who had just let out a sigh of relief, suddenly felt uncertain again. His heart that had just calmed down was in his throat again. Soon after, he no longer hesitated. His body immediately turned into an afterimage as he used his full speed to fly in the direction of the medicine garden. At this moment, the herb garden in a radius of 100 miles had already become a huge, pitch-black, bottomless pit. Dark Star Emperor had paid the price of a drop of his blood essence to summon the former might of the royal seal, causing it to expand to a size of 50 kilometers. It covered the entire herbal garden as it attacked indiscriminately. At that moment, the herbal garden no longer existed. Even the last trace of it had been mercilessly buried by the royal seal in a bottomless pit. Soon, the Dark Star Great Emperor appeared in the sky above the herb garden. He didn't care about the destruction of the herb garden at all. The only thing he cared about was the life or death of that outsider. The Tao birth fruit has already been taken away by him. If he successfully escapes this time and uses the Tao birth fruit to raise his strength to become an enemy of our clan, the consequences will be unimaginable. I can no longer sense his aura underground. Could it be that he has already fallen? The Dark Star Great Emperor thought to himself. At that moment, his expression was solemn and his nerves were tense as though he was facing a great enemy. He didn't dare let his guard down at all. He spread out his consciousness with all his might and began a carpet search of the land below as well as the depths of the ground. He swept it over and over again. However, at that moment, soil suddenly flew up from the ground 100 miles away. A figure covered in blood rushed out from the ground at an extremely fast speed. In an instant, it rushed 1,000 meters into the sky. He's actually not dead. The Dark Star Great Emperor cursed inwardly, looking at the figure that had no aura at all, to the point where even his consciousness couldn't detect him at all. He immediately gritted his teeth. With a wave of his hand, the royal seal that had been smashed deep into the ground immediately flew out. At that moment, the Dark Star Great Emperor couldn't care less about the consumption of his blood essence. He once again burned his blood essence to cast a mystic technique to reawaken the royal seal's former power. The next moment, the royal seal tore through the air and instantly arrived above Genshin's head with a vast pressure. However, this time the royal seal was one step too late. The spatial laws around Genshin flashed, and he had already left the place, causing the royal seal to miss. Now, the Dark Star Great Emperor couldn't detect Genshin's aura at all. Apart from his naked eye, he couldn't discover Genshin's existence. This phenomenon made the Dark Star Great Emperor anxious. He immediately spread out his consciousness to capture any clues in the void. At the same time, he flew high into the sky and rapidly scanned the surroundings from a high vantage point. Finally, hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, he discovered traces of Genshin with his naked eye. Following that, his body immediately flew over like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, he burned his blood essence one drop after another, awakening the royal seal's former power time and time again. He launched a thunderous strike at Genshin from a great distance. He had no other choice. In terms of speed, he was no match for Genshin, who had gained insight into spatial laws. And with Genshin having the Tao birth fruit in hand, there was no way he could let him leave alive. Therefore, the only thing the Dark Star Great Emperor could rely on was to use the royal seal's temporary space-tearing powers to carry out a long-distance kill. But now, the initiative was in Genshin's hands. With the Dark Star Great Emperor in a passive state, it was naturally difficult to use the royal seal's power to carry out a long-distance kill. This was because Genshin's directions were ever-changing and unpredictable. As for the Dark Star Great Emperor, he had to first discover Genshin before controlling the royal seal to tear through space. He had lost the initiative, and with this delay, it eventually resulted in the royal seal appearing above Genshin's head, allowing Genshin to leave first. The Dark Star Great Emperor's face was livid as he pursued Genshin relentlessly. He burned his blood essence again and again as the royal seal released the might of a medial-grade divine artifact. After a long period of expenditure, even with the Dark Star Great Emperor's strength, he couldn't withstand it. After all, he had used a god-tier battle skill 6 times earlier, which was extremely taxing. After burning his blood essence so many times to power the royal seal, the Dark Star Great Emperor finally felt rather exhausted. Even with that being the case, the Dark Star Great Emperor had no thoughts of giving up. He tailed behind, following the traces Genshin left behind as he fled. He crossed a small portion of the Dark Star world and was only forced to stop when he was about to enter the depths of the Two-World Mountain Range. Outside the Two-World Mountain Range, the Dark Star Great Emperor's presence surged into the clouds. His fury surged like flames as he stared fixedly at the fog-shrouded Two-World Mountain Range. Unforgettable hatred filled his eyes. The Two-World Mountain Range was not peaceful either. Sensing the Dark Star Great Emperor's presence, all the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts in the mountain range produced thunderous roars. The ground trembled as the mist surged. Powerful primordial realm, life-devouring beasts had already emerged from the depths, charging towards the Dark Star Great Emperor with hatred. The Dark Star Great Emperor stood before the Two-World Mountain Range as he stared at the special region shrouded in mist deeply. For the first time since he was born, he felt powerless from the depths of his heart. Sigh. In the end, the Dark Star Great Emperor sighed at the sky. He stopped before the Two-World Mountain Range in the end and did not barge in. This was because he could no longer sense Jianshin's presence. If he wanted to find him, he could only look with his eyes. However, the mist in the Two-World Mountain Range blocked his vision. Not only was it extremely difficult to search, but he also had to face the encirclement of many life-devouring beasts. It was extremely disadvantageous for him. The Dark Star Great Emperor retreated. He returned to the royal capital of the Dark Star race. Chapter 2931. The 10 Hall Masters and all the Vice Hall Masters were still on their way to the medicinal garden. Aside from the Dark Star Emperor, there was not a single primordial realm expert in the royal capital. The Dark Star Emperor stood at the top of the Divine Hall as he silently stared at the ruined royal capital below. He silently watched as countless Dark Star clansmen moved corpses and cleaned up the battlefield. He said nothing for a very long time. The entire royal capital was enveloped by a gloomy atmosphere. It no longer possessed its former glory, making it seem especially oppressive. Thousands of miles up in the sky, the altar had not disappeared. Tian Xingxian's figure had clearly become faint, as if a gust of wind could blow him away. He stood on the altar and looked at the Dark Star Emperor who had already returned, a victorious smile appearing at the corners of his mouth that no one could see clearly. "Emperor, have you taken back the divine beast's body?" Tian Xingxian's figure silently appeared beside the Dark Star Emperor. His tone was heavy, and there was clearly a hint of anxiety. The Dark Star Emperor remained silent. He stared at the city below as if he had not heard Tian Xingxian's words at all. Only after a while did he speak slowly. His voice was sorrowful and filled with doubt. "Tian Xingxian, let the Emperor ask you, have you really not been able to tell that Kun Tian had already been replaced by someone else?" Tian Xingxian sighed at the sky and said bitterly, "I was wrong. I never thought that this person would possess a treasure that can perfectly conceal his presence. Although there are treasures like that in the Saints' world, they're all god artifacts of quite a high quality without any exception. They can't be brought into the Dark Star world. However, I've never seen or heard of a treasure that can be brought into the Dark Star world and possess such great disguising abilities in the Saints' world." Looking at it now, Kun Tian had already been replaced by someone else the moment he lost his memories. I never thought that he would be able to disguise himself for so long right under my nose. Sigh. I also have an unavoidable responsibility for the failure of the grand ritual this time. I am the greatest sinner of the entire clan. Tian Xingxian's tone was low and filled with guilt. There was also a deep hatred mixed within. As soon as he heard Tian Shengxian mention the ability to disguise himself, the Darkstar Emperor could not help but think back to his interactions with the amnesiac Kuin Tian back in the Darkstar race, as well as the ability Genshin had displayed to completely conceal his presence. He immediately felt resentment. Not long after, the 10 Hall Masters and all the Deputy Hall Masters who had rushed to the herb garden returned one after another, once again gathering in the Imperial City. However, all the Primordial Realm experts became heavy-hearted when they saw the miserable state of the royal capital. They were stern and felt miserable. Feng Shui, the 10th Hall Master, looked as if she had lost her soul. Her expression was filled with sorrow, and she was in low spirits. I never thought that Kuin Tian would actually be impersonated. In other words, it's extremely likely that he killed our 8th Hall Master, a Deputy Hall Master of the 8th Hall said through gritted teeth. No one replied. The 8th Hall Master's death was suspicious, and he was in the Two-World Mountain with the impersonator. There was no need to doubt his death. This was because the impersonator did possess such strength. Moreover, the 8th Hall Master was in the Two-World Mountain at the time, so his strength was suppressed. However, the impersonator was a cultivator from the outside world, so he could ignore the suppression to a certain extent. The disparity in strength between the two sides was huge in the first place. Coupled with the fact that the 8th Hall Master was weakened, the 8th Hall Master was obviously unable to escape. Everyone listen up. Immediately summon all the clansmen and use their blood as a sacrifice to activate the incantation scriptures. Gather the will of the entire clan and activate the supreme incantation. The Darkstar Emperor ordered decisively. All the Primordial Realm experts of the Darkstar race were shocked when they heard that. Emperor, do we really need to do this? Emperor, we haven't been forced to do that yet. The enemy is powerful, but it's not like we can't fight. The Darkstar Emperor glanced past everyone coldly and said coldly, the fruit of ways has already fallen into the hands of the cultivator from the outside world. Once he breaks through, the consequences will be unimaginable. We need to kill him regardless of the cost before he breaks through. Jianqin dragged his heavily injured and battered body through the forest in the Two-World Mountain. He kept his presence concealed, so no energy leaked out from him at all. He seemed like a ghost as he moved silently. Even the life-devouring beasts that littered the forest failed to discover his existence. He was just too heavily injured from the battle against the Darkstar Emperor. In particular, when he was smashed into the ground by the royal seal with the power of a medium-quality god artifact. He had basically suffered fatal injuries. If it were not for the powerful vitality and recovery granted by the chaotic body, it would have been impossible for him to last until now. This was because his current situation could no longer be described as miserable. If an ordinary person were to see him, they would probably call him a demon with a face full of horror. There was a crack in his head, and a glowing primordial spirit could be faintly seen hiding inside. His entire face was badly mutilated, and his facial features could no longer be distinguished. Half of the flesh on his upper body was gone, and part of his sternum was completely shattered. His internal organs were all damaged, and even a small part of his left arm was broken. It was a horrible sight. Although he was so heavily injured, Jianqin's presence of life was still extremely vigorous. Every inch of his flesh, and even every drop of blood, possessed quite a lot of life force. At this moment, the life force stimulated his chaotic body, causing his wounds to gradually recover. Jianqin moved in a completely zigzag manner, constantly changing his direction. He moved through the depths of the Two-World Mountain randomly, like a headless fly. However, with the mask hiding his presence, he was not afraid of being discovered by the life-devouring beasts. In the end, Jianqin finally stopped after venturing who knew how many kilometers into the Two-World Mountain. He leaned against a towering tree and sat down on the ground as he gasped for breath. However, just when he touched the tree, a crack suddenly appeared on the trunk of the tree that was several hundred meters tall. It was like an eye had opened silently. In the next moment, all the branches of the towering tree suddenly began to dance. They immediately fell down, forming thorny vines that wrapped around Jianchen. Jianchen was immediately swallowed up. He was surrounded by countless layers of branches, making him seem like a huge cocoon. To no surprise, the towering tree was a life-devouring beast. Not all the life-devouring beasts in the Two-World Mountain were in the shape of animals. Every single flower, blade of grass, and rock could gain intelligence and become a life-devouring beast. The tree wrapped around Jianchen with countless branches. Clearly, it wanted to use a special method to devour Jianchen's life force. However, soon after, the great tree began to tremble. The entire tree began to shake more and more violently. Under its devouring, not only did the tree's vitality not increase, it was decreasing at a terrifying speed until the entire tree withered and shrank rapidly. It failed to devour Jianchen and was instead devoured by Jianchen. In just a few breaths of time, this incomparably sturdy, towering tree had completely turned into a withered tree, losing all signs of life. The life force of a mere divine king, realm, life-devouring beast is still too weak to me. Moreover, there's an imprint that's difficult to remove hidden within the life force. Whatever, I'll use it to heal for now. It's better than relying on the chaotic body to recover. I'll refine the imprint slowly after some time, Jianchen thought. Afterwards, he allowed the withered branches to wrap around him as he slowly healed in peace. Under his control, the rate of recovery of his injuries immediately increased by quite a bit. However, the injuries he had suffered this time were just too severe. If he wanted to fully recover, he would still need quite a bit of time. Jianchen did not want to waste too much time healing, so he took out various healing pills from his space ring and gulped them down like candy. These healing pills all came from cultivators in the outside world. Although they were not of great quality, there were a lot of them, so it was better than nothing. Afterwards, he took out many god-tier, heavenly resources from his space ring. He no longer cared about wasting them. After identifying their types and effects, he began to consume the ones that could help with healing. These heavenly resources all came from the medicinal garden of the Darkstar clan. Earlier, when the laws of Time Crystal had accelerated the growth of the phantasmal fruit, Jianchen had swept through the entire garden. He stowed away all the heavenly resources that caught his eye. There were all kinds of heavenly resources, so they just happened to come in handy now. With the help of these heavenly resources, Jianchen's wounds immediately healed much faster. His flesh grew back, and his organs were reconstructed. Even his severed left arm had recovered completely. The ability to regrow limbs was nothing difficult, even for godhood cultivators, let alone Jianchen, who had reached the primordial realm and cultivated the chaotic body. As Jianchen healed, the Darkstar clan was not peaceful either. All the cultivators in the outside world had been captured, and the Darkstar clan began to interrogate every single one of them. They wanted to gather all the information they could about Jianchen. The 100 Saints City received even more attention from the Darkstar race. Everyone was taken to the Darkstar race's royal palace. The 52 organizations that had remained in the 100 Saint City because of the Fifth Hall Master's protection were all doomed. All the Divine King loyalists they had brought with them were executed, and all their subordinates were interrogated. They had even used methods similar to soul-searching to make full use of them, but they were still mercilessly executed by the Darkstar clan. This time, the Darkstar clan was unprecedentedly cold-blooded and vicious to the cultivators in the outside world. This was not only because the person who had impersonated Kuan Tian had protected them in the past, but also because the 100 Saint City had taken part in the destruction of the Darkstar clan's grand ceremony. The artifact spirit of the 100 Saint City had used all the power in the city, paying the price of her life to keep the Darkstar Emperor busy with a startling strike. That was why Jianchen had the opportunity to steal the divine beast used for the sacrifice so easily. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for Jianqin to steal away Siyu with the Dark Star Emperor personally watching over it. He might not even have succeeded. As a result, the Dark Star clan held a grudge against the 100 Saints City. In particular, the Dark Star Emperor's grudge towards the 100 Saints City was no less than Jianqin's. The prodigies of the 100 Saints City all felt wronged because what happened to the 100 Saints City had nothing to do with them. It was completely out of their control. However, how could the Dark Star clan believe their one-sided story? Even when they discovered that they really did not know anything after interrogating them, they would still push the blame to the organization behind them. With the prodigy's puny strength, it was indeed impossible for them to do such a thing. However, the 100 Saint City was personally created by the peak clans of the Saints' world after all. With the abilities of the peak clans, they did possess methods that were almost miraculous in the eyes of the Dark Star clan. As a result, the prodigies of the 100 Saint City were unable to explain themselves. P.S. Brothers, you can follow the official WeChat account of the Primal Chaos Sword God. 660-110. Chapter 2932. Afterwards, the Dark Star Emperor remained in seclusion in the Dark Star Divine Hall, while the 10 Divine Halls personally appeared, interrogating the important people who had survived in the 100 Saint City in great detail. They collected all traces and searched for all possible clues and evidence. The 10th Hall Master, Feng Shui, even called the 2nd Hall Master, and Erna, to investigate the soul-destroying land with her. However, they still failed to confirm Jianqin's true identity under such detailed interrogations, but they still found a few people worthy of suspicion. They were the young master of the Ash Wolf clan, Jin Hong, the young master of the Five Flower sect, the Saint Sun Wu Hua, Yang Yutian of the Tianhe clan, and Gu Qi, who had disappeared after causing a huge uproar in Dark Night City. This was because most of the cultivators in the Dark Star world were gods and over-gods. There were countless Divine King experts, and basically every single one of them possessed great origins. After all, cultivators who could reach Divine King within 1,000 years were dazzling figures even in the Saints' world. The Dark Star race basically had records of people like that. Now that they eliminated the Divine King that the Dark Star race had captured, there were not many people left. Among the few Divine Kings, it was naturally extremely easy to find the most powerful and most outstanding Divine Kings who had gone missing. Jin Hong has already left the 100 Saint City, and he has the bloodline of the Wolf clan. Moreover, he appeared with Kuan Tian at the same time, so he can basically be eliminated. Only Gu Qi, Yang Yutian, and the Saint Sun Wu Hua remain the most suspicious. Gu Qi grasps the laws of strength, and the people of Dark Night City insist that he broke through in the city, so it shouldn't be very likely. The Saint Sun Wu Hua grasps the laws of space and the laws of time. He comes from a large sect in the Saints' world, so he has proof. However, the person who impersonated Kuan Tian also grasped the laws of space, and his laws have reached the primordial realm. However, the Wu Hua Saint doesn't seem to have grasped the laws of the sword. As for the last one, Yang Yutian, this person has comprehended the way of the sword, and his attainments in the way of the sword are not low. He has also dabbled in the law of space, and his strength is extraordinary. His origins are also unclear. He claims to be an independent cultivator and was once separated from his team in the Two-World Mountain. Then he traversed the entire Two-World Mountain alone, and his whereabouts are also extremely mysterious. Moreover, the primordial realm powers of the 5 prodigies in the 100 Saints City failed to kill him. In the end, he mysteriously vanished after killing the 5 prodigies. After a meticulous investigation, the 10 great divine temples finally made some progress. Even though they knew that it wouldn't be of much use, even if they found out the identity of the fake Kuan Tian, they still felt extremely humiliated when they thought about how they had been fooled by the fake Kuan Tian and how they had been cheated of a large amount of superior divine, kinggrass, and ancestral sacred land. If they could not even find out the true identity of the fake Kuan Tian, the Dark Star race would be just too useless. As a result, The upper echelon of the Dark Star race had already sworn that they would definitely find out the true identity of the fake Kuan-Tian. This independent cultivator, called Yang Yutian, once traversed the Two-World Mountain alone and stayed there for an extremely long time. Moreover, he mysteriously vanished soon after appearing. He suspected to have entered the Two-World Mountain again. He entered the Two-World Mountain this time to complete Kuan-Tian's request and kill a large number of divine king realm life-devouring beasts. For a moment, Yang Yutian's name basically became the focus of the 10 great divine temples. The fake Kuan-Tian had once entered the Two-World Mountain as Kuan-Tian, and Sun Ran died at that time. Coincidentally, Yang Yutian appeared in the 100 Saint City again at the same time as Kuan-Tian entered the Two-World Mountain. After Yang Yutian killed the prodigies of the 5 major forces and disappeared, Kuan-Tian was coincidentally found as well. Kuan-Tian and Yang Yutian both appeared at almost the same time. One disappeared, the other appeared, and the other disappeared, and the other appeared. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? The 10 great divine temples began to suspect and immediately began to gather all the information about Yang Yutian. The prodigies of the 100 Saint City were also interrogated countless times. In the end, all the clues were connected, and the 10 great divine temples finally confirmed Kuan-Tian's true identity. All the signs pointed to the fact that the fake Kuan-Tian was Yang Yutian, without a doubt. Yang Yutian, I'm going to kill you and the Tianhe clan. I won't let you go. Feng Shui lost control. Her killing intent was boiling as she screamed at the sky. Her heart was already branded with an unforgettable hatred. What? The 5th Palace Lord, Kuan-Tian, has always been Yang Yutian in disguise? When the surviving prodigies of the 52 organizations learned of this, they were all dumbfounded. All of them were stunned. Thick, white mist blotted out the sky in the depths of the Two-World Mountain, enveloping almost half of the Dark Star world. Within the dense white mist was a huge eagle that was several hundred meters large. Its feathers shone with a golden light as it spread its wings and soared through the sky. It scanned the area below in a scrutinizing manner, as if it was a king inspecting his territory. To no surprise, the golden eagle was a life-devouring beast. Its slightly intelligent eyes proved that it possessed a certain level of intelligence, and the presence it gave off had already reached the level of an infinite prime. Even though the sky-blotting mist could block the vision of all cultivators, it was transparent in the eyes of the golden eagle. Its gaze could easily pierce through the mist, allowing it to see extremely far away with great clarity. At this moment, a place in the dense forest below attracted the golden eagle's attention. This was because a withered tree had actually appeared there. The withered tree was dark gray. It was extremely eye-catching in the sea of blue vegetation. It was impossible for it to not attract attention. The golden eagle's huge wings flapped violently, and it immediately changed directions. It immediately flew over with great wind pressure. At the same time, Jianqin, who was surrounded by layers of withered branches, opened his eyes at that moment as well. His gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the obstruction of the countless branches and the mist, allowing him to see the golden eagle rapidly approach him. A primordial realm, life-devouring beast. Jianqin's heart skipped a beat. He immediately sensed the strength of the life-devouring beast. Afterwards, his body only trembled slightly, and the branches around him immediately snapped apart. I've concealed my presence, so it's impossible for the life-devouring beast to discover me. It's probably because of the withered tree behind me. Jianqin stood up. Even though he could easily kill the first heavenly layer infinite prime with his strength, he only wanted to find a safe place to recover and then break through after consuming the fruit of ways. He did not want to cause any trouble. However, just when he was about to leave, his face suddenly changed. A smear of surprise appeared in his eyes. After a moment of thought, he gave up on the thought of leaving immediately. His presence changed, and his appearance changed as well. He became Yang Yutian. Chapter 2933. As soon as the golden eagle landed, it discovered Gentian, who stood before the tree with a single glance. Its huge eyes naturally landed on Gentian, and it stared at him without blinking. Gentian rose into the air, hovering at the same height as the golden eagle. He stared at the golden eagle in surprise and smiled faintly. "I never thought I'd be able to see you again, and you've even broken through to the primordial realm. I wonder if you still remember me." Gentian could not help but think of the time when he first came to the Two-World Mountain. After separating from the group, he had tamed a divine king realm life-devouring beast as his mount. To no surprise, the divine king realm life-devouring beast was the golden eagle before him. Now that they had met again, the eagle had already reached the primordial realm, which made Gentian sigh in amazement. The eagle did not disappoint Gentian. Very soon, it recognized the human expert who had helped it in the past. If it were not for the fact that Gentian had given it the primordial realm life-devouring beast Sniden after killing it, it would have never been able to reach the primordial realm in such a short amount of time. In the next moment, the golden eagle produced a long cry. It was filled with joy, and its head that was several times larger than Gentian slowly arrived before Gentian. It rubbed its head against Gentian gently. A rare smile appeared on Gentian's face. He used his hand to stroke the eagle's head. The golden feathers had a metallic texture and were extremely tough. "I didn't think that you would still remember me." The golden eagle produced a clear cry as if it was communicating with its own language. Afterwards, it suddenly turned around, and its back immediately appeared beneath Gentian's feet. Before Gentian could even agree, it flapped its wings and shot into the sky with a powerful gust of wind. It carried Gentian into the sky. The golden eagle soared happily in the misty sky. It looked down at the forest below in appraisal and pride. It produced a series of clear cries as if it was introducing Gentian to its territory in a language that Gentian did not understand. Along the way, it released the pressure of the primordial realm. Wherever it passed by, all the life-devouring beasts prostrated themselves on the ground fearfully, as if they were paying respect to their king. Gentian sat on the eagle's broad back as he smiled faintly. When he tamed the eagle as a mount, he had only done it casually. Afterwards, he killed the primordial realm life-devouring beast and gifted it its Sniden. However, he had never thought that his actions back then would create a king of Two-World Mountain in such a short amount of time. In the end, the eagle returned to its nest with Gentian. It was an extremely large treetop, and the tree was also a life-devouring beast. Its strength had reached the peak of Divine King. Just like that, the golden condor landed on the crown of the tree. Immediately, the countless branches of the tree danced in the air. Each branch had a different number of weak life-sucking beasts tied to it, and they were all delivered to the condor's mouth. These were all food for the golden eagle. The golden eagle opened its mouth and sucked in all the food. It was satisfied. Afterwards, it seemed to think of something. It removed the cover in a corner of its nest, revealing a small puddle of green liquid that radiated with life. Afterwards, it used its head to push Gentian towards the green liquid, pushing Gentian towards it. Gentian naturally recognized the green liquid. It was the water of life condensed from dense life force. It had wondrous effects on both healing and refining pills. At the same time, it was something that all the cultivators in the outside world collected. The water of life could be regarded as a special product of the Dark Star world. However, it only appeared in Two-World Mountain. It would not appear in the territories controlled by the Dark Star race. Gentian understood what the golden eagle wanted very soon after looking at the small puddle of water of life and analyzing its actions. He could not help but smile and gesture. "You want to give this water of life to me?" The golden eagle did not seem to understand what Gentian was saying, but it understood Gentian's gesture, so it immediately nodded. "All right, I'll accept the water of life then." Gentian did not hold back. He immediately took out a jade bottle and stored all the water of life away. There was not a lot of water of life, only around 2 kilograms, but it was still quite valuable. The presence of life is just too dense. It's probably very difficult to find such high-quality water of life in the Saints' world. Probably only the two-world mountain created by the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit Clan can produce such high-quality water of life, Jianqin thought. He gained an even better understanding of just how rare the water of life was in the Saints' world. Although water of life was rare in the Saints' world, it was not impossible to find. As a matter of fact, some experts who grasped the corresponding laws could create water of life with their own power. However, it would be very difficult for them to achieve the same quality as the water of Two World Mountain. Afterwards, Jianqin extended the senses of his soul into the divine hall he carried with him and began to check on Siyu's injuries. Very soon he frowned. Siyu was currently lying unconscious in the divine hall in his original form. Jianqin could clearly sense two different bloodline powers actually clashing and fighting against each other. One of the two bloodline powers came from the droplet of essence blood from the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race. At this moment, the Dark Star bloodline power from the Grand Exalt's essence blood was extraordinarily powerful. It basically occupied 99% of Sacred Feather's body. The other bloodline power came from Siyu himself. It should be the bloodline of the Winged Tiger. However, compared to the bloodline of the Dark Star race, the bloodline of the Winged Tiger was much weaker. Before the bloodline of the Dark Star race, it was like a lone boat in the vast ocean. It was so insignificant that it was in imminent danger. However, while Siyu's bloodline power was very weak, it displayed unimaginable stubbornness. Under the powerful suppression and assimilation of the bloodline of the Dark Star race, it was like a candle that could be blown out with a gust of wind, but it still persisted. No, Siyu's bloodline power was completely assimilated during the Dark Star race's ritual. When I saved Siyu back then, I sensed it clearly. There shouldn't be any bloodline power that belongs to him left. Jianqin was surprised. He immediately began to observe carefully, and to his surprise, he discovered Siyu's flesh, organs, tendons, bones, and skin. In short, Siyu's entire body possessed mysterious vital energy. It seemed to have surged out from the deepest parts of his body. Strands and strands of it gathered together, forming the weak bloodline power within Siyu in the end. This was Siyu's original bloodline power. The droplet of essence blood from the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race actually failed to completely erase Siyu's bloodline. Jianqin was very surprised. However, even though he had discovered something, there was nothing he could do about Siyu's current situation. Afterwards, Jianqin observed Siyu's soul and discovered that Siyu's soul was a mess. Jianqin did not possess particularly great mastery over the soul, so he struggled to discern the exact situation immediately. Looks like I can only ask a few chaotic primes or even grand primes to help me take a look once I get out. Jianqin was helpless. Even though he had saved Siyu, he was unable to come up with any good ideas regarding Siyu's current situation. After all, this involved the Grand Exalt's bloodline. The level was just too great, so it was not something an infinite prime like him could interfere with. Afterwards, Jianqin began to consider his next step. He had already mostly recovered. Although he had not fully recovered yet, he was close. The first thing he had to consider was finding a place to break through. Chapter 2934. Not only had he broken through this time, but he had also broken through to the chaotic body. He had no idea whether these two breakthroughs would cause too great of a disturbance, so he needed to find an absolutely safe place. The territory of the Dark Star world was definitely out of the question. He could be discovered at any time, and if he attracted the attention of the Dark Star Emperor at a crucial moment, the consequences would be unthinkable. However, the Two-World Mountain was not bad. The people of the Dark Star race did not dare to set foot here, especially the territory controlled by the Golden Condor. It could repel the harassment of many life-devouring beasts. However, he was also worried that his breakthrough would cause too great of a disturbance and attract the attention of many primordial realm, life-devouring beasts in the two-world mountain. Although the golden condor was also at the primordial realm, it was unable to stop other primordial realm, life-devouring beasts as a first, heavenly layer infinite prime. After thinking about it, the safest place is the entrance between the Saints' World and the Dark Star World, because it's located in the depths of the two-world mountain, and it's enveloped by a powerful barrier. No life-devouring beasts can pass through it. Even the people of the Dark Star race can't reach there. That place is a special region that only foreign cultivators can set foot in, Jianchen thought. However, the only problem was that he had no idea where the entrance to the Saints' World was. After all, the two-world mountain was just too large, almost the same size as the territory controlled by the Dark Star race. At the same time, the landscape changed at all times. If he proceeded in a straight line, he would discover that he was going around in circles in the end. As a result, it was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to find the entrance in such a large region if he did not have an accurate location. Jianchen was not worried about not being able to find the Dark Star World in the two-world mountain. After all, he had spent so much time in the Dark Star World, so he had left behind many marks already. He only needed to sense the location of the marks to find his way out easily. However, he did not leave behind any marks at the entrance to the two worlds, because he had come here for the first time and did not know what was going on. When Jianchen accidentally glanced past the golden condor beside him, his eyes immediately lit up. Not only was the golden condor a life-devouring beast native to Two-World Mountain, but it had also reached the primordial realm, becoming one of the kings of Two-World Mountain. It even possessed a territory of its own. Did it know where the entrance was? Jianchen immediately started communicating with the golden condor. However, he was hesitant because the condor was a life-sucking beast. Although it had a certain level of intelligence, it was not very intelligent. There was a huge obstacle in communicating with it. In the end, Jianchen tried a variety of methods and spent a lot of effort before the golden condor finally understood his intentions. The golden condor raised its head high as if in thought. A while later, it suddenly produced a clear cry, indicating for Jianchen to leap onto its back. Immediately, it took off with Jianchen. With a powerful gust of wind, its huge body vanished into the thick mist in a single instant. The golden condor flew through the mist with Jianchen on its back. It moved extremely quickly, changing directions from time to time, avoiding the territories of other primordial realm, life-devouring beasts, and rapidly approaching the center of the two-world mountain. In the end, after flying for who knows how many tens of thousands of kilometers, the golden condor stopped in an area where the mist was thin. It stared ahead with clear fear in its eyes, no longer daring to move forward. I never thought I'd find the place so quickly. It looks like the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts Niden wasn't given away for nothing. Jianchen let out a sigh of relief. He extended the senses of his soul and sensed the barrier 100 kilometers up ahead. To no surprise, the tunnel between the two worlds was within the barrier. Jianchen leapt off the golden condor. After bidding farewell to it, he crossed 100 kilometers in a single step and appeared before the barrier in a single instant. The barrier could stop all life-devouring beasts and the mist, but it was useless against cultivators in the outside world. Jianchen passed through the barrier and saw the huge swirl of energy in the air 100 kilometers away with a single glance. This was the tunnel between the two worlds. As long as he passed through the swirl of energy, he would directly reach the Spirit Sage's world. Only cultivators from the outside world can set foot in here, but the strongest cultivators who can enter here are only at the Divine King realm, so it's the safest place to break through, Jianchen thought. He did not approach the entrance of the tunnel. Instead, he found an extremely remote place on the edge of the barrier and cast down a spatial barrier. The spatial barrier possessed a certain level of defense and could stop the senses of the soul below the primordial realm. Of course, its greatest use was to refract light, which was enough to confuse the naked eye. As soon as the spatial barrier was formed, Jianqin immediately vanished. The light in the region he was in had already been refracted, so even if cultivators from the outside world passed through the tunnel, they would not be able to see Jianqin with their naked eyes. The spatial barrier could cut off the senses of the soul. Although it was useless against primordial realm experts, it was enough to deal with the divine king. The barrier around the region could also cut off the senses of the soul, and Jianqin was close to the barrier. As a result, even if the senses of the souls of divine king realm cultivators were blocked by the spatial barrier, they would mistake it for the barrier. Jianqin sat within the spatial barrier and continued to recover. Before ingesting the fruit of ways, he needed to maintain his peak condition so that nothing could go wrong. A few days later, Jianqin slowly opened his eyes. He had completely recovered, and even the power of his soul that he had used up from using the profound sword qi had been replenished after ingesting some god-tier heavenly resources from the Dark Star race. It's time to break through. Jianqin sucked in a deep breath. With a flip of his hand, the fruit of ways that had advanced to high quality appeared silently. As soon as the fruit appeared, the laws of the world immediately appeared, revolving around it. At that moment, Jianqin immediately felt the laws of the world that seemed to be hidden in the depths of the mist immediately become much clearer, allowing people to see through them more clearly and more easily. Even if he did not directly ingest the fruit of ways, just cultivating beside it would make it easier for him to comprehend the laws of the world. Jianqin could not help but feel rather excited as he stared at the fruit of ways in his hand. Afterwards, he ate it in a few bites. As soon as the fruit of ways reached his stomach, an extremely dense presence of laws permeated the surroundings. Jianqin immediately felt like he was standing in an ocean of laws. The endless power of laws revolved around him, completely drowning him out. Immersed in this sea of laws, the mysteries of the great Tao that were usually extremely difficult to see and comprehend became incomparably clear in an instant. When comprehending the laws, the phrase, "twice the result with half the effort," was far from enough to describe the speed at which he comprehended the laws. Now, all he needed to do was to infer and comprehend the laws of the world that had obstructed Jianqin's progress and prevented him from comprehending the laws of the world. He immediately understood everything. Without any exaggeration, Jianqin's comprehension of the laws of the sword increased significantly with every passing second.